Good morning, and welcome to the seventh session of the Ballot Simplification Committee meeting to prepare an overview of the measures contained in the voter information pamphlet and the November 3 ballot. My name is Betty Packard, and I was appointed by the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences. Michelle Anderson was nominated by the Pacific Media Workers Guild. Lauren Gerardin was nominated by the League of Women Voters, and Scott Patterson was nominated by the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences. Our clerk is Peter Stevens, and our attorneys are Jenica Maldonado and Andrew Shin. This term, we are operating a little different from years past because we are operating from home rather than a City Hall hearing room. Therefore, we have instituted a different way of approaching each measure to consider. Each member of the committee takes the lead on interpreting a draft presented by the deputy city attorney. It is then posted online and then presented to the committee for discussion by the leader. Once we have arrived at a consensus, we open the floor to public comment. You are welcome to call in with your comments with the substance of our conclusions. We then go over your comments to see if they add to the measure. There is a final reading, which is then a final draft for the day. There is an appeal process if you do not agree, and we will go over that at the end of that process. I also need you to know that this committee has nothing at all to do with the title. It is set by the Director of Elections, and your comments should be directed to him. Our first item on the agenda this morning is business tax based on comparison of top executives' pays to employees' pay. And the leader on that for our committee was Michelle Anderson. Michelle, it's all yours.
Okay. I guess that we can start off with the reading paragraph by paragraph.
Let's just have a full reading of Jenica's draft, and then you can just, rather than, then you can go the way it is now and the proposal and stuff as you have rearranged it. So.
Okay.
All right, Peter?
The way it is now, the city collects a tax on gross receipts from many businesses in San Francisco, gross receipts tax parens, at a rate between 0.16% and 0.65%. Certain businesses with more than $1 billion in gross receipts, 1,000 employees nationwide, and administrative offices in San Francisco pay an administrative office tax based on their payroll expense instead of their gross receipts. Administrative office tax parens. For those businesses, the tax rate is 1.4% of their payroll expense. State law limits the amount of revenue, including tax revenue, the city can spend each year. State law authorizes San Francisco voters to approve increases to this limit for a maximum of 4 years. The proposal, Proposition blank, would create a tax that generally applies to a business in San Francisco when its compensation for its highest paid executive, top executive pay, parens, is more than 100 times the median compensation for its employees based in San Francisco, employee pay, parens. Bullet. For a business that pays the gross receipts tax, if its top executive pay is over 100 times employee pay, then the business would pay an additional tax between 0.1 and 0.6% of its San Francisco gross receipts. Bullet. For a business that pays the administrative office tax, if its top executive pay is over 100 times employee pay, then the business would pay an additional tax between 0.4 and 2.4% of its San Francisco payroll expense. Proposition blank would also increase the state's limit on the city's annual tax revenue spending by the amount of additional taxes collected under the proposed tax. The increased limit would last for 4 years. A yes vote means if you vote yes, you want to place an additional tax on businesses in San Francisco when their highest paid managerial employee earns more than 100 times the median compensation paid to their employees based in the city. A no vote means if you vote no, you do not want to make this change.
Okay, thank you. Well, why don't I do it this way? Just go paragraph by paragraph?
However you do it.
Okay, so in the way it is now, I put the parenthetical gross receipts tax closer to the actual language about on the tax on gross receipts. And I also changed, I think, certain businesses to some businesses in San Francisco. I changed the spelled out percent to the percentage sign, and I added annually.
Okay.
So, okay, all right. So I will go on to the next one. Businesses, I think I got rid of certain businesses.
You did.
Okay. What's more than, and then also I put the parenthetical administrative office tax closer to the actual tax language, and so it doesn't appear at the end of the sentence. And then I had the tax rate is once again percentage sign of their payroll expense. Now this may have in the next paragraph, I don't know why it stopped me, but I sort of changed it for up to 4 years to last for up to 4 years. Maybe we don't need the extra language, but I found myself stopping to digest the original language, but perhaps it's just me. Now, this is where I got seriously not stuck, but it gave me pause. In the proposal, it says,
Shall we go over the way it is now with any changes?
oh, yeah.
Let's do before we get to the proposal.
Sure, okay.
So that we compare it if we need to go down.
Right.
Okay, anybody on the committee?
Well, I think that what I heard Michelle saying is that this phrase to last for up to 4 years is somewhat different than the matching phrase in the proposal, which says limit would last for 4 years.
Could it be, yeah, could it be 4 years or?
It says a maximum of 4 years.
A maximum.
So,
so they could impose a limit which could last for 6 months, 1 month, 1 year, 4 years. And I just found, I mean, it's not a big deal. I just found this easier to read, but if you don't.
For up to?
With that too. For up to.
Yeah, I'm okay.
So this is one of the challenges is this is a sentence that we have used in other digests. So if the function is the same, it would potentially help the voter for this sentence to stay the same as we use it in each digest. So for example, in the real estate transfer tax final digest that we approved, we say state law limits the amount of revenue, including tax revenue, the city can spend each year. State law authorizes San Francisco voters to approve increases to this limit for a maximum of 4 years. So I'm just confronted by the challenge of saying the same thing in different ways and expecting the voters to understand it's the same thing.
Well, I mean, okay. So you think that each one, so you don't think that what we've done in the past is more difficult to parse than this one? Okay.
I think we rewrote this when we just did this real estate transfer tax we just did. Not.
Okay.
That's from this session, so it would be in the same voter guide.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Also, what I may not have mentioned is state law limits the amount of revenue, and the original said including tax revenue. I don't know if we really had to.
And that's what our real estate transfer tax final digest from this session also says.
Really? Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So my suggestion is to use the same language that we use for this in each of our digests this session.
Okay.
Yeah. We can't go back and when those are final, so it's hard to change those at this point.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
I think Michelle's reads much easier, and this is an interesting tax that's never been applied before, and the real estate transfer tax happens all the time. We're always changing the real estate transfer tax, this is a new one. I can appreciate the continuity, but you know, I am also looking at Michelle's and looking at how easy it reads, considering the fact that it's a new concept for the voter to understand. So that's my thinking.
Yeah, either way,
Scott, you haven't.
yield to the wishes of the committee members.
Well, this is for us all to discuss. So Scott, you haven't ventured in here yet. What's your thinking?
If I were going to choose one, I would choose the language that's on the screen right now for up to 4 years. That's what I would do. It does read better.
Yeah,
And I think it communicates effectively to the voter.
Yeah. And the other place where Lauren would put it back in, because it was in the other, is to include the phrase including tax revenue, where it says state law limits the amount of revenue, comma, including tax revenue. I don't know why we did that the other way when this reads so much better.
Well, I think that in different digests, I think there's so many other issues that probably overshadow stuff like this. I think that may have been the reason. Yeah, but this is sort of nakedly there.
I actually don't think this is legally correct, though.
Okay.
I don't know. This is a Jenica or Andrew question, because state law limits the amount of revenue the city can spend each year. So let's say that the city takes in a fee for a service like playing golf, right? Does the state law limit the city's ability to spend that revenue? I don't know.
Well, that's spent the amount of revenue.
And so I think that maybe the qualifier came in to be just kind of narrow that a little bit.
Jenica?
I mean, this goes to a concept known as the GAN limit. Our tax attorneys looked at this language after you all adopted the final digest and were fine with the prior language. They had no problems with it. So,
well, so what you're saying that the state law can limit how much the city can spend every year, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So
there's a 1970s constitutional amendment that puts this principle in place. Right. Which I explained a little earlier in our process.
Right. So this sentence is.
I mean, it's not wrong, right? Because it says amount of revenue, and then before it said including tax revenue. So tax revenue is encompassed in overall revenue.
Yeah.
Right.
One thing I'm noticing, Michelle, and you know, I'm not speaking about the readability of the sentence. I'm looking here. The sentence as is written now speaks about revenue, but the 2 paragraphs above do not speak about revenue. So when we take out the reference to tax revenue that was there, it's not clear to me why this paragraph exists at all. It kind of requires the voter to understand that when we're talking about tax, that revenue is an outcome of that. And usually we make that connection more crystal clear. So, you know, there may be another solution to making that connection.
That makes sense. Tax, including what they get from these taxes.
Yeah, we all know I don't like the phrase tax revenue at all.
Yeah. Including tax. So what you're saying is that to make a connection between revenue and taxes, it should be clear that the city gets money from imposing taxes, and it spends that money that it gets from taxing people.
Well, we don't have any precedent for that in the preceding paragraphs either. So,
well, I just think it's extra words, but
yeah, I tend to agree. But Scott,
I mean, when you tax something, the assumption is you get some sort of money, and that money, since it's going to the city, will be spent. And the question here, how much of it can they spend? And the state law puts limits on what they can spend, whether it comes from taxation or other things. So I think that the point of this is that, yeah, you have all this, they had this pot of money, but the state says, okay, this is how much of this pot of money that you can spend each year. So the most important thing is what state law does.
So I think it ties together if we say state law limits the amount of revenue, comma, including tax revenue, the city can spend each year. That ties the idea of a tax from the first two paragraphs to the concept of revenue in this paragraph. We've gone through and said we have to include this in the way it is, and we have to include it in the proposal for tax initiatives and ordinances. So I think that state law limits the amount. No, don't. Where are you going? Here, I'm confused. State law limits the amount of revenue, comma,
including tax revenue, which is what the original said.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Comma, including tax revenue, comma, including tax revenue.
Yeah, that to me clearly connects this paragraph to the preceding ones.
It does.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, anything else?
No.
It's very small. Second paragraph, last sentence. The tax rate is. Oftentimes we say this tax rate when we're going to start talking about lots of different tax stuff.
Huh.
Small thing. Sometimes we do it, and we seem to think it helps. This tax rate is 1.4%. It's a little half a dozen of one, 6 of another.
I don't know.
It's a style thing. It's a tone thing. Yeah. Okay.
I think if we're going to put this, it would be down below where we've changed this new tax rate or whatever we do. Like under this proposed tax or something. I don't know. It's neither here.
It's neither here nor yeah. I don't have any strong feelings.
I don't have any either.
So it's
Yeah, sorry, I just pointing out something that we've been doing for the past few days. If we wanted to drop it on this one, then we can drop it on this one. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, that's what you're there for.
So do you think that this reads better than the?
Yeah, I believe this reads a little better than the.
This tax rate. Okay, then we can change it to this. Yeah.
Okay, that was in this section. Yeah, that was all.
All right, the proposal, Michelle?
Yeah, I got sort of stuck on the definition of top executive pay because the original says the compensation for its highest paid. I put a hyphen there, and then it says executive. Is that what it says originally?
Originally executive.
Yeah, well, I thought that was too narrow because that would imply that only employees with managerial duties would be affected. And in theory, they could say, well, this person who's being paid gazillion dollars is I think that the term is line employee, whereas our CEO makes less. Oh, golly. Okay. And the actual legislative language says that
Janica has her hand up.
okay.
I hate to interrupt, but before we go down a rabbit hole, I want to just make a correction for the group, which is our error. The legislation that Michelle reviewed, unfortunately, was outdated.
Yeah.
And so the more accurate version of the legislation Peter has now available on for your viewing on the web or on the screen here, so we can reference that as needed. but there were some discrepancies, and I noticed Michelle made a few edits that were based on an older version, so I sincerely apologize about that. That was error, clerical error on our part. There were
Will that
two
explain
versions of
the
this measure that
percent?
were circulating. Yeah, so unfortunately,
I thought I
it's not
I
your
just-
fault. No, yeah, and that was our fault. So I'm sorry about that. So the particular issue you're raising right now, I don't know if it was or wasn't implicated. I didn't read the older version closely. I just read the actual version. But I wanted to point that out.
Go down one page, please, Peter. Because that's where it was in the version I have, right? In here, definitions, compensation, executive pay rate. Let's go down a little further.
I'm not seeing it.
Employee is based in the city.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just keep going. There was a definition of highest paid employee.
Yeah.
There you go.
Highest paid managerial employee. It does expressly call out the managerial function.
That's what I was looking for on line
This is
15.
the newest version.
This is the actual legislation that has that effective. This is what we're basing it on. The prior
So
version
I'm
is
looking at C.
I'm sorry, this is not the version that's on the website, on the Department of
This is-
Elections
Highest paid
website.
managerial employee.
exactly. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, because here it says highest paid employee, and that was what I was going on.
What we got is trash.
So
Throw it away.
Okay, well that's now. What about the
That's what I'm trying to
percentages?
correct.
She's trying to say it was amended in committee, so it's been upgraded since the original.
Oh, okay, well
So-
that
No,
sort of solves
that's not what I'm
my question.
Oh, okay.
Because
It
here
just
in
changed.
the old version it says highest paid employee, whereas the digest referred to essentially managerial employee, and I said like, because those are two different things.
It's now highest paid managerial employee.
Okay.
Because that's on line 15 of the
Thank you.
ordinance.
Yeah, well, that's not the one that I work with. Now, what about the percentages? Are those changed too? Because
Yes.
I was working from an older version, and it just didn't make these numbers didn't make any sense. But I think that I pointed that out. Mystery.
Betty,
So
Betty,
the error.
Jenica?
The error is not that this has since updated. It's not that. It's that there was a clerical error by Peter and I.
Okay.
That what is posted on the Department of Elections website is not the correct version of the legislation.
Okay.
There were two versions of this legislation from the beginning. One was submitted via initiative, and one was submitted directly to the department, which is what is on the website. That's wrong. And one was submitted directly to the Board of Supervisors. That version prevailed. That version is now what is on the screen before you, and what is the version that our digest, the City Attorney's Digest, is based on.
Okay, well, that makes sense.
I have just a question about procedure and then also a concern related to this. I have not had an opportunity to read this legislation. The only version of it that's available to us is on Peter's screen. I don't feel adequately prepared to review this digest without having reviewed the legislation. And so I'm wondering what happens if the committee has not been provided the documents that we usually are provided.
Let's ask Jenica if there were significant changes besides the title of the executive, and because if there are, we can table this until Thursday.
The only changes were adding of the definition managerial and lopping off of the higher tax rates.
What?
So there are not significant changes,
So
but I appreciate Lauren's concern. This unfortunately did not come to my attention until we had started committee and I opened up the document and realized that the wrong link had been placed on the website. So I sincerely apologize about that. You may take a moment. One place that you could reference for some comfort is that the changes are summarized in a single paragraph inside the legislative digest, which I can direct Peter to, and we can bring that up onto the screen. You can review that now. we could take a brief recess and you could read this version. It's not very long. And then we could resume in, 15 minutes, if that would give you some comfort.
Peter,
I think that would be more
email,
efficient than retabling it and renoticing it.
Right.
Peter, can you email the documents to us?
Yeah, that would really help.
Yeah, I would
think for
appreciate
the
some time to read this without the chatter also happening simultaneously. I have trouble fully processing all the legalese while also trying to pay attention to a conversation that I am hopefully supposed to be a part of. A brief recess would be enough. I'm not suggesting we need to table this, but 5 minutes would be appreciated.
Let's recess until 10:10 and have Peter send us. Would you wish it individually? Is that what you're wanting, or just on the screen?
I want it via email.
Yeah,
I would prefer-
I would suggest that Peter email the current version of the legislation as well as the legislative digest to each member. We will also endeavor to post this information to the Department of Elections website as fast as possible. The cache is a little slow for the website, as I understand, so it might not be immediately effective, but that way we will get the information to the public as fast as we can so that they can also participate in an informed way in our discussion.
Okay. All right. We are recessed until 10:10.
Okay.
All right, so make sure that your microphones are muted. So unmute your microphones.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Well, this clears up many of my questions, because there was one section that I didn't really see. But excuse me.
Betty.
And I had a question about the percentages, because what we had didn't really jive with what I had. I think. Now the percentages didn't match up, but now they do, which is good. Okay, so yeah, my question had been, okay, so what it should be now, based on the most current version, is the highest paid managerial employee, right?
Correct.
Okay, and the percentages now match up.
So Peter, the second line in the proposal,
Mhm.
compensation for its highest paid managerial employee.
Yeah, okay. And
Just like it already says that in the yes vote.
well, that was my question.
Nope, wrong place.
Second line, Peter. Compensation for, second line of the first paragraph of the proposal.
The proposal.
I think the problem is Michelle was still on the way it is now, and Scott has come to the proposal. So yeah. All right.
All
right. We're on the proposal now, Michelle.
Yeah, we're on the proposal. And so what it should read is highest paid managerial employee.
And would you take out top executive pay then?
No, because the original had it as highest paid employee, which is based on an older version of the legislation.
I think we use top executive pay and employee paid quite a bit more in the bullet. So I would keep those parens with those concepts called out in that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if top executive pay, we seem to be inserting the word executive. I understand it's used in headings in the ledge, but in terms of the actual application, it's highest paid managerial. Employees in organizations I worked in are not always necessarily executives. Like it depends on the structures are structures, right? Like, so we might in the parens want to say top manager pay or top managerial pay.
Manager,
It seems odd to just pick
yeah.
that word out of the blue.
Okay, yeah, because that was, I think, key to the previous version. So how about top managerial pay? Top manager
I
pay?
think that's clear.
Yeah, oh yeah, because we are introducing a different word. So should it be top manager or top managerial pay? Which would make more sense? Which sounds better? Because we say next employee pay, so maybe top manager pay.
That's fine, I think.
It's not euphonic, but it's
It's
pretty clear.
It seems good.
So top manager pay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I see where they came from, because in the Legislative Digest it says the highest paid employee in the calculation of the executive pay ratio. So I see where they came from that, but perhaps managerial is more descriptive.
Yeah.
So should it be managerial or manager?
I like manager. It's a simpler word. So if we're creating a parens, to choose the simpler word seems a good choice.
I think so.
So Michelle, I'm looking at the changes that you made, and thank you for catching some things that we've done in previous digests during the session. The parenthesis sign for one. One change I was looking at is the way that the percentages as a range are expressed in the bullet. So right now it says between 0.1% and 0.6%. It's actually that would mean that it's not inclusive technically by using the word between. So it wouldn't include 0.1% and it wouldn't include 0.6%. It would just be the numbers in between those. So instead we could write would pay an additional tax of 0.1% to 0.6%.
Well, we could say from 0.1 to 6.2.
Yeah, or from just some other, just getting rid of the word between.
Okay.
And I know that when we've represented ranges before, we have used a dash. It doesn't mean we have to use it, but that has been something we've done before. But again.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Michelle had suggested we go from 0.1% to 0.06%.
So that would clearly include zero. Yeah, sure.
And then in the second bullet.
The second bullet. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And that would. Okay. Sure.
Yeah, just a precision thing.
Okay. So, and these numbers now match up. Thank goodness. Okay.
All right. Was there anything else that you were concerned about in the proposition?
The proposal. Okay, so now that we're calling it top manager pay, we would have to change it in the first bullet. If it's top manager pay, and we'd also change it in the second.
Peter has that.
We did that already, Michelle.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at my draft. Sorry.
The only change that we need on the one that's on Peter's screen right now is that in the last sentence of the proposal, we need to add the increased limit would last up to 4 years.
Yes. Okay. Highest paid man. Okay.
And then I have one.
Thank you.
Addition to offer for consideration. As I was rereading the new ledge text, I noticed that there are exemptions, and most of them are fairly convoluted and have a lot of references to other codes and other exemptions and other things. But one of the exemptions that's mentioned is certain small businesses. And I think sometimes we do point out exemptions, especially to new taxes, because people really do want to know whether it's something they or people like them or people they know are going to have to pay. So we could add a sentence very simply, that would say certain small businesses may be exempt from this tax.
Well, yeah.
Jack was raising her hand, so maybe I'm misreading something in the ledge text.
Well,
You're not, but I want to get back to something before we get too far off. The prior edit on the up to 4 years, that is wrong. It's just fixed 4 years. And this is another reference to that GAN limit language that we talked about earlier. So it's a straight 4 years.
so this is specific as opposed to what could be.
We need to
that
change it in the way it
same-
is now too.
Yeah,
In the way it is now, we
I
need to
can't-
change it back to last for 4 years.
Well, the voters could be asked to approve a limit of 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years. In this specific proposition, they're being asked to approve a limit of 4 years.
yeah, it goes from a way it is now general idea to what is actually happening now. And this case, it would last for 4 years.
It's not up to, if you can change that, Peter, it's for 4 years.
It would last for 4 years. Yeah. I mean, even though in theory one could have the option to set any type of limit up to 4 years.
Anything else?
Uh,
Are we clear now, Jenica? Are we legal finally?
Yeah, I'm sorry I interrupted you, Lauren, on your other thought. I just didn't want to get too
No,
far off.
no, while we're there, we needed to do that. All right, Michelle, Lauren has brought up the idea that we add the small businesses may be exempt. While we're at it, I am reading the legislative digest. It also imposes a new tax on cannabis providers and sales activities. So seems to me every once in a while they throw a little extra into the measure, like
Betty, do you have a reference in the ledge text? Just so we can do it.
it's on page 2, right in front, right before the amendments to the current law. The last bullet.
wait a minute. For the last bullet? Oh, Lord.
Of the new legislative text that we received, the last bullet that begin at the top. In fact, it's the only bullet specified at the top of the page. Says, commencing in 2021, Article 30 will impose an additional tax on all businesses engaged in cannabis business activities in the city, equal to 1% to 5% of the gross receipts, etc. So
I
I actually can't find that in the
Yeah, I'm
legislation.
trying to wait.
can't find that.
So that's page what again? Page.
I've searched
it's
the,
the
I've done a
legislative
control.
digest. It's in the legislative digest that Peter sent us, which was separate from the
Oh,
Oh,
It's in the legislation.
is it in the legislation? Huh.
well.
I'm.
oh, okay. So Betty, I see it. So in the digest version, yeah, there's the only bullet on the page.
Right.
It's not in the extended ledge.
But wait. So we're looking.
So,
where?
Is this a reference?
Oh.
I see.
So Betty, that's a section describing existing law. It's not describing what's new in this.
That's not in the legislation.
Yeah, I can't
It's not.
find
So thank you for that. Except
Okay, great.
That is correct. It's just a recitation of existing taxes that our businesses
okay.
pay. And
okay.
so we left that out of the way it is now because not only a select number of businesses operate in cannabis, and so there are special taxes imposed on them. But given that it's a fraction of the business community, we did not include it in the way it is now.
Okay. All right.
And there's no express change directed to cannabis in the proposal.
Okay, that answers that question for me. I just
Okay, great.
suddenly caught caught it and went, really? When did they throw that one in? So,
No, that's just a overview of the types of
of
there's
different
general taxes and
receipts.
special taxes that businesses pay, and so that's just a summary of the overview
Well, it threw me
and the way
because
it
it
is
said,
now.
the only reason it threw me was it said an additional tax. So that rather threw me, but sometimes.
Yeah, it is an additional tax for like in present time, not
Okay, yeah, all right.
after this measure.
I appreciate the explanation, so, all right.
Okay, so the small business, let's see, on page 6, some of them, the ones that have that are exempt from gross receipts tax would be subject to the CEO tax, but the ones that are subject to oh God.
So yeah, so my solution was to acknowledge the existence of the exemption and avoid getting into all of the complexities that might apply in the exemption, and to just say certain small businesses may be exempt from this tax and leave it there.
Yeah, but what yeah, that's a. I mean, I thought that would be taken care of by Proposition X would create a tax that generally applies, which means that implies that there are exceptions.
That's true, and often we have found it helpful, and I think in this case it is helpful to call out this exemption since it does exist. We don't always call out all exemptions, but small businesses in the city do tend to worry about taxes affecting them, and I believe it would be helpful for voters to know that small businesses are exempt from this tax.
Scott, what you thinking?
Some small businesses. I think that's
certain.
Scott, your comment?
So I think two things. I wonder the extent to which a recognition of the exemption couldn't be dealt with it as a ballot argument rather than in the digest.
Oh.
I think that we do that by calling out. I mean, it's very clear, right, in the way it is now that we're referring to a subset of businesses that have this scope, right? I just wonder if we open a can of worms, trying to define small business and going back into the gross receipts tax language that we used. I remember talking about that when we did the gross receipts tax. And so I'm uncertain how much it adds.
I just look at this and I see, I totally appreciate these points, and they're really good points, right? Like I just look at this and I think a two-person small business, right now, the way this is written, it's unclear if it would apply to them, and that could be pretty scary, right? You can have one person paid much more than another in a two-person business.
But 100 times,
I think we can get around that, because in the way it is now, we talk about businesses with more than $1 billion in gross receipts and 1,000 employees. We could include that in the proposal, and that settles the fact that this tax generally applies to a business, with gross receipts taxes of $1 billion or more and 1,000 employees.
Yeah.
I think if we put it there, we'll have to reword that sentence. But if we put it there, then we negate having to go into the small business side of things.
My concern is that the exemption is not a small business exemption. The exemption is based on are you subject to the tax?
Right.
And so certain small businesses are not subject to an administrative office tax. Certain small businesses are not subject to gross receipts tax, but other small businesses could be subject to the gross receipts tax, right? And so that the exception is not across the board for all small business, only those small businesses that are already exempt. So if we did anything,
Yeah.
it would have to be, businesses that are already exempt from the gross receipts tax and the administrative office tax would not
Yeah, right.
pay this new tax.
Yeah.
But couldn't you qualify it by saying that this applies exactly to what was in the way it is now to businesses that have $1 billion or more in gross receipts? Because I don't know too many small businesses
Yeah.
that do.
Yeah. No, and plus 1,000 employees nationwide, I think. A small
Actually,
business.
we're overthinking this. It's already in the first sentence
Yeah,
of
I
the
mean,
bullet.
these are like, it seems, yeah, I mean, it seems that this tax applies to pretty substantially large businesses because.
Well, Michelle has it right. For a business that pays the gross receipts tax, you
Yeah,
don't pay the gross receipts tax, you're not going to pay it.
right.
For a business that pays the administrative office tax,
Right, yeah.
you pay the administrative office tax, you're not going to pay it.
So, yeah,
I think it's
Because,
there.
I mean, it's more of a question of what sort of tax applies to a business of this size, i.e. 1 billion in gross receipts, 1,000 employees, and it has a presence in San Francisco. That's the way I look at it. Also, I think that when you say generally applies, wherever that is, I mean, that does encompass the existence of some exceptions.
I'm fine with the way it reads now.
Yeah, but
I think it's in the bullets. I don't think we need to call it out.
And
yeah, I think it's sort of, I mean,
I tend to agree that we don't need the small business exemption because we're just getting into a whole brand new ball game here.
yeah, well.
And then the other thing is in the first paragraph of the proposal, last line, there's an extra space after the word "it's."
Okay. Okay.
All right, would you like to go through the yes vote? Because I saw you made a change or two there. Are we just parroting or what are you doing? You changed a little, you changed a word. You took
Betty,
out
who
base.
are you addressing?
Where?
I'm kind of,
If you,
I'm sorry.
oh, sorry, I didn't realize if you were talking to Michelle or someone
the
else.
yes vote, the only thing that I changed was managerial employee, but that was based on the old version of
Okay.
legislation.
All right.
But that was one of these things that was
Okay.
rendered moot now that we
Okay.
have the most updated version.
Okay. Now, Lauren, you had a question?
No, it wasn't, I didn't know if you were speaking to Michelle or me since I'd just been talking right before that.
Now we're back to you.
I think in the yes vote, we are actually being overbroad, right? Because we're implying in the yes vote that this tax applies to all business.
I agree.
And so I think it could be simply fixed by you want to place an additional tax on certain businesses or some businesses.
Yeah, okay.
I don't care.
Good point. Yeah, some businesses. Okay.
Those businesses?
No, because there's no reference to that.
Okay.
Yeah, we can see.
Yeah,
We're trying to get out of gross receipts and the all that language in the yes vote.
Yeah, in previous digests, sometimes one of the ways we've kind of worked around this is to have another parens, and this one's got enough parens, I'm not suggesting this, another parens that says parens large businesses, and then use that as a reference, define what we mean in the digest by that. But, I agree with Scott that the yes vote did seem to be a little overbroad.
Yeah, okay, some businesses. Okay.
Jenica, you look like you were getting ready to, or trying to say something earlier.
I'm okay. Thank you, Betty.
Okay. So we're fine with the yes vote, and if you vote no, you do not want to make this change.
Yeah.
Is there anything else any person in the committee has something to say? If not, I would ask for a reading.
The way it is now, the city collects a tax on gross receipts tax, (BRENS), from some businesses in San Francisco at a rate between 0.16% and 0.65% annually. Businesses with more than $1 billion in gross receipts, 1,000 employees nationwide, and administrative offices in San Francisco pay an administrative office tax, (BRENS), based on their payroll expense instead of their gross receipts. This tax rate is 1.4% of their payroll expense. State law limits the amount of revenue, including tax revenue, the city can spend each year. State law authorizes San Francisco voters to approve increases to this limit to last for 4 years. The proposal. Proposition blank would create a tax that generally applies to a business in San Francisco when its compensation for its highest paid managerial employee, top manager pay, (parens), is more than 100 times the median compensation for its employees in San Francisco, employee pay, (parens). Bullet. For a business that pays the gross receipts tax, if its top manager pay is more than 100 times employee pay, the business would pay an additional tax from 0.1% to 0.6% of its San Francisco gross receipts. Bullet. For a business that pays the administrative office tax, if its top manager pay is more than 100 times employee pay, the business would pay an additional tax from 0.4% to 2.4% of its San Francisco payroll expense. Proposition blank would also increase the limit on the city's annual tax revenue spending by the amount of additional taxes collected under the proposed tax. The increased limit would last for 4 years. A yes vote means if you vote yes, you want to place an additional tax on some businesses in San Francisco when their highest paid managerial employee earns more than 100 times the median compensation paid to their employees in the city. A no vote means if you vote no, you do not want to make this change.
Yeah, one thing way at the beginning, since you're doing the from to construction for percentages, so a rate from 0.16% to 0.65% annually.
Agree.
Okay, 2.
Okay.
This is perhaps just an observation. At the beginning, in the first paragraph, we use the city, and then we say San Francisco, and then we kind of bop back and forth between saying the city and San Francisco. In previous digests in this session, we have tried to simplify and just say the city as much as we could. And so I don't, that's something we could clean up here, and it might make this more consistent, at least with what other digests say, which could be beneficial for the voter.
So, but I remember in other digests, we went back and forth within the same text, or am I remembering correctly?
My memory is that we usually said the city unless there was a reason to say San Francisco but just in general in the digest, we say the city instead of San Francisco.
It was more like this is what the city and county does legally versus location indicator as in San Francisco.
Right, like we say San Francisco voters, we don't say city voters, but that's,
right, yeah.
But there's other places in here where we, in other digests, tended to use this. It's an observation, it's a recommendation just for consistency, but take it, leave it, that's up to you.
I got the impression, although no one really said this, that when you're dealing with the legal and administrative functions of the city and county of San Francisco, the term cities used when you're just dealing descriptively, like this is where so-and-so lives in San Francisco, then we spelled out. But I might be wrong.
No, I think you're absolutely correct, Michelle.
Okay. Yeah, I just don't know if it was ever really made explicit.
Right. So then here, for example, in the first bullet that ends says San Francisco gross receipts. And I think then based off of what you've said, that would be this. I'm just, we don't have a standard for this. We kind of just write as we will, as what makes sense. And just, again, it was an observation.
Okay, well, it could.
I-
Good to point out that.
I would leave it. I think that Michelle has grabbed the essence of it. And when we talk about the city, somebody for sure is going to say, but that also, since San Francisco encompasses a city and county, so and we do that many times. But we say San Francisco voters, we understand that those are people who vote in San Francisco. But when we talk about a business in San Francisco, I think we encompass the entire city and county. So, I understand why we do this. I realize it doesn't, to the average look, it looks like we're going back and forth, but
Exactly, yeah. I mean,
I think there's a reason for why we do it.
yeah, I think so too, but it's nice to have it sort of spelled out. Yeah.
Right.
Sort of.
Well, Scott, you've been amazingly quiet. Are you, you have nothing to say at the moment?
It really doesn't matter, right? We use the words interchangeably throughout. Each of these digests is a separate short story. And I think we just should always make a decision on what's best for this digest. I don't think a digest-wide style guide necessarily is best when we have these two terms that are interchangeable. I would move this to public comment.
Thank you very much. Then now is the time when we open the floor to public comment. We ask that you contain your remarks.
Betty, you need a reading.
We need a reading.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we didn't
Oh,
change.
no, we just did a reading, didn't we?
Did we just do a reading?
Yeah, we did just do a reading.
Oh,
Sorry, my bad.
All kind of.
no, I was there with you, Scott. I, for some reason, forgot we had read the thing.
Well, then we got into the discussion about San Francisco, and we got into the changing the wording.
We changed a few things, but they're small.
Too, but we didn't change any substance. So
No.
now's when we open the floor to public comment, and we ask that you contain your remarks to the substance of the issue and tell us what we have missed in terms of substance, and that you keep your comments to approximately 4 minutes or so. And to that, we open the floor. We have a caller, first caller.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Good morning, David Pilpel. First of all, I am fairly concerned that this was, well, I don't want to accuse you or the committee of a bait and switch, but that the measure that was on the website and the measure that you're discussing now are different. And I did not have the time and don't pretend to, within 10 minutes, be able to digest a different version and make sense of it. So I would strongly encourage you, whatever comes out of this today, to not adopt a digest today, but to recess or continue this item at least till Thursday so that others may have a chance to review it. I think it is a bad idea to substitute something at the last minute and hope that people have the time to get it right and do it right. So that's on that. Nevertheless, I think you're doing a good job in trying to make sense of the thing. My comments on the substance here, the 2 lines that are above are the last paragraph in the way it is now and the last paragraph in the proposal. I would either use the exact text that you had in the real property transfer tax, or if you've got better language here, and arguably there are points here that are slightly better than the wording in that, then I would fix that. But I would try to be consistent about the GAN limit language for each tax measure. I don't see why it should be different in a different measure. It's just stating what is true in the way it is now that applies generally, and what would be different under the proposal, which the way I read all of them would be a 4-year increase. So that's my comment on those lines. More specifically on the wording of the 2 bullets under the proposal, I think those are both fairly wordy, and I would try it a different way. Again, I would need a little time, but I think it would read something like businesses that pay the gross receipts tax would pay an additional tax from 0.01% to 0.06% of their gross receipts in San Francisco if its or their top manager pay is more than 100 times employee pay, period. And the second bullet, if you want me to read it out, it would be similarly structured. I just think that this, for a business, if its top manager pay, the business would pay of its, is just very convoluted language. I have no idea how that translates. And I just would try to make it more straightforward.
All right.
I also had 2 other very quick comments. When I read the city in these digests, I read that to mean the entity, the city and county of San Francisco. When I read San Francisco, I understand that to mean the place, including voters or businesses or people in. So as to your comment about using the city or San Francisco interchangeably, I don't think they're exactly interchangeable, and I think I would agree with Member Anderson's take on that pretty much. There was, I think, one other bit. I think that's good for the moment. Thank you. If there's anything else, I'll catch it in the next pass. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much. We have Supervisor Haney on the line.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Great. Good to be with you all again. Thank you again for all of your hard work on this. So I just have a few things that I wanted to flag that I think are important to making sure that we're communicating in as straightforward and simple of a way what we're trying to do here. This tax, which we're referring to as the overpaid executive tax, is a very simple and straightforward tax measure. And I think in line with what you all were grappling with there, want to make sure that we communicate it in as simple a way as possible. The main couple of things I wanted to flag. The first thing is in the second paragraph, the piece around businesses with more than 1 billion in gross receipts, and sort of describing in a lot of detail both the gross receipts tax and the administrative office tax, I think can create some level of confusion. And I think that even the gross receipts tax itself is really what is just the revenue of the company. And so I think there's probably a simpler way to communicate what these 2 different types of taxes are without creating a lot of detail or confusion. So I guess I would just ask whether that particular paragraph is needed. To the extent that it is, you could say something more simple like many businesses in San Francisco are taxed on the revenue they earn, parens gross receipts tax at a rate between 0.16 and 0.65%. Other businesses are taxed based on their payroll expense, parens administrative office tax at a rate of 1.4%. I just think there's a lot of information there that could create some confusion as to what it is exactly that we're doing. Similarly, I do think it is very important that there is a reference to executive pay here and top executives. The tax bracket that is going to be used here is the executive pay ratio, and it's actually referenced in the legislation very clearly that we're referring to an executive pay ratio. And now this description doesn't reference top executive or executive pay at all. And I looked up, just to be clear, I looked up in dictionary.com. Executive is a synonym for an employee with senior managerial responsibility. So I do think that top executive is a is the more accurate way of saying what we are doing here rather than top manager. In fact, it actually reflects the language that's in the legislation as it relates to the executive pay ratio. And so I think it could create some confusion if we're talking about managers rather than executives, when the legislation is definitely about executive pay ratio. And then lastly, I do think it is very important to make it clear that this legislation has a small business exemption. There was a point made that somebody may read this and think that it could apply to their corner store, that has a couple employees. That is very much not this case, and there's an explicit small business exemption. So the exemption is referenced in the legislation and codified in San Francisco Business and Tax Regulation Code under Article 954.1, which says that small businesses do not have to pay the gross receipts tax if their taxable revenue is less than or equal to $1.17 million. It's very clear that small businesses who are under that level of gross receipts will not pay this tax. And I think that for that not to be made clear anywhere in this digest, I think could confuse voters into thinking that this might apply to some small businesses that have revenue under that level. And it's a very explicit exemption here that I think will be important for voters to know when they make their choice here. This tax structure here in this executive overpaid executive tax was meant to be as simple as possible in terms of its structure, and I want to make sure that that's communicated as best as possible to voters, and so those three things: the small business exemption, the mention of the executive pay ratio and the top executive, and the question about how much information at the outset is necessary for voters to understand the decision they're making, I think are very important additions and changes to be made. And again, just thank you so much for your time. And I know this is, we're trying our best here to make sure this is as simple and straightforward to voters as possible.
And we thank you very much for your suggestions. Is there anyone else online? If not, then the public comment is closed. David had some suggestions, but I asked the committee if you think they are substantial enough if they change the substance of the issue.
Yeah, Betty, I was just the suggestion on the GAN limit that David had. I am just curious as a function. So sometimes we have Peter change things that are more of an administrative kind of change to make consistencies across digests. If we have decided that our description of the GAN limit is better here, could we change it? Or Janica's got her hand up. She's probably going to come in. That would be.
Janica?
That would exceed the scope of housekeeping.
Okay, so we would have to use what we've already talked about that. So okay, that was all. I just was wondering.
Peter?
Yeah, Betty, I've just been notified that we did have people waiting on the phone line for public comment. So I just wanted to let the.
Oh, well, if it wasn't on my list, so I'll reopen the public comment to whomever. It's kind of difficult when we're online and I can't see that there's someone online. And
please press *3 if you're calling in.
So we are reopening public comment for the people who were waiting online. I see there were 2 at least. All right. Caller 12.
Hi, my name is Nikki Santana, and I currently work at Laguna Honda Hospital, and I'm a union officer for Local 21, representing hundreds of healthcare professionals in San Francisco. As a healthcare worker, I support the overpaid executive tax because we need this money to help support our nurses, doctors, healthcare workers as we deal with this pandemic. San Francisco needs to be ready when the next wave hits. We believe that big companies that can afford to pay their executives million-dollar salaries every year can afford to pay their fair share in taxes to help us recover. The pandemic isn't over. Cities around the country are preparing for a spike in the curve by stocking up on medical equipment, hiring nurses, doctors, first responders, and other essential healthcare workers. This measure not only raises much-needed funds to fix the cracks in our healthcare system, it also incentivizes companies to invest in their workers, not just their executives. Also, this is not a tax on small businesses. This will not affect them. The overpaid executive tax only applies to companies that pay their executives millions of dollars a year. Please support Supervisor Haney's overpaid executive tax. Thank you.
Thank you. Caller 13. Caller 13.
Thank you for taking more public comment through the committee. Appreciate the openness and transparency of the process. My name is Rudy Gonzalez. I'm the Executive Director of the San Francisco Labor Council. We represent about 130 different democratic worker organizations, fondly referred to as organized labor. And amongst those are essential and frontline healthcare workers that are facing off this crisis. I think that it's timely to consider this proposal. I think in terms of the actual simplification process, we agree this is about executives and executive pay ratio. And so it's really important that that verbiage be present in the final ballot, not the managerial word. I think that's that'll conflate things and confuse the voters. This is about large companies, not small businesses. So I think that we need to really stress that executive and executive pay be called out in the process. And I would echo the last caller's comments for all the smart policy reasons. This will position us well to either get overpaid executives to pay their fair share or decrease and chip away at income inequality by raising the wages of their average workers, which will both help our economic recovery and overall response. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Anyone else online? Do you see it? Is there anyone else in the queue who hasn't, whom I can't see, Peter?
No, I don't see anyone who has a hand raised. It would be *3 if you're calling in, but I don't see anyone else.
All right, then public comment is closed. We've gone back to, we were discussing David's comments and whether they added substance to the digest, and Lauren had shall we renew what you were saying at the moment?
No, I was more just asking if there was a way to bring some harmony without having, but it doesn't seem that there is unless we use the version we don't like from the other digest. So I think it's fine. And a good note for future consistency, but we're going to live with it today.
All right. And then we will go into Supervisor Haney's discussion. And I think he, as well as the other two who are supporting this legislation, are interested in the simplicity as much that it's a compensation of overpaid executives. So perhaps we want to look at simplifying that even more. Some were concerned with the executive versus management, if that was complicating things. So I think somewhere we need to look at this. And so I would suggest that as a substance measure that we look at to see if it really is as simple as everybody wants us to make it.
So I heard Supervisor Haney suggest to say in the way it is now to simplify that whole thing as really a place where maybe we're putting a lot out there in maybe not the most simple way. And the suggestion I heard was many businesses are taxed on the revenue they earn.
Right. That's what he said.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And that seems so clear. And I think that could be a good pattern to use as an alternate to what we have there now.
The problem is all businesses pay tax on the revenue there.
Well, so are we talking about the first line? The city collects tax on tax and revenues they earn, gross receipts tax. So is this what we're saying?
No, Lauren is referring to the second paragraph,
Okay.
which is specifically what the supervisor was wanting us to reduce.
So you're saying businesses with more than 1 billion in revenues?
We would say
Gross revenues?
So the supervisor suggested 2 sentences, so it would be for both the first and the second, but I'm noticing Danica has her hand up. I don't
Janica.
know if it might be.
I just thought I would offer a suggestion to simplify this and keeping it legally accurate if you're interested. I mean, simply all you could say, because the first sentence relates to gross receipts, I don't think there's much way of changing that.
Right.
You could eliminate the percentages, but I would advise against that. I think it's relevant. The second sentence concerns the administrative office tax, and that does have more details than maybe are necessary. And you could simply just say, you could refer them as certain large businesses with administrative offices in the city, and omit some of the other details if you're trying to simplify. But these are the businesses that pay the administrative office tax are these really large format information technology companies, large corporations that occupy a lot of space in the financial district. Some of the larger companies that operate in town is typically it's a relatively small number of very large companies.
I keep hearing the word overpaid executives. I think that's a bias to the legislation, which we cannot do. But but I also like the fact that when by spelling out 1 billion in gross receipts and 1,000 employees, we're emphasizing that this is a relatively small group of people who are going to have this extra tax, who are going to acquire this extra tax, and that. Well, the voter looks at 1 billion and 1,000 goes, wow, yeah, let's tax them. Is that
slightly different? I mean, conceptually, what this sentence that I just read applies to is an existing tax, the administrative office tax, which will be independent from the CEO tax.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would go along with that.
Okay.
So what are we changing?
Shall we can look at it? Let's look at it and see what we think. Michelle can look at it and see if that changes her concept.
Well, what did we change?
Could you please reread that?
My suggestion simply is that you eliminate some of these numbers and you just say certain large business or certain, what was the language I had?
You said
certain large businesses.
Certain large businesses, okay.
With administrative offices.
With administrative offices in the city.
Yeah.
With in the city, okay, pay an administrative office tax.
Yeah, that would let
okay. Yeah.
That would simplify it.
Certain large business, okay, which would exclude small businesses, which is good. Okay, based on their payroll expense. Okay, their gross receipts.
Yeah.
Okay.
So do you like that as well, or you like yours better, Michelle?
Well, I prefer the numbers, but if this will reach a larger number of voters, then I'm fine with it. But I still prefer the specificity, but that's just me.
Scott, your thoughts?
I'm okay with the change.
Yeah.
I don't think it misleads. I think that if anything, large business serves to overrepresent the businesses that pay the administrative office tax, because really it's jumbo businesses pay the administrative office tax.
Well,
But you know,
I don't know if that could be a term of art, but hey,
this is, I think large
I like
business is
it.
fine as long as we define it maybe elsewhere.
I was thinking, yeah, Scott, I was with you. I'm like, wow, large businesses, these are like extra large businesses in a way. And I actually added large business as something I would like to see words you need to know for that reason. But I don't know that we need to define it here, which is what the earlier, more detailed version was doing, was defining these businesses. And is it helpful to define it here? And I think as long as we define it somewhere in the words you need to know, I don't mind this change.
Well, yeah, but a large business for one measure may not be the same as it is defined in another measure.
Yes, and the words you need to know calls out which definitions are specific to measures for that reason.
True. Okay.
Sometimes we define nonprofit differently in one measure versus another.
Yeah,
We just don't get into those weeds in the digest. Yeah.
But I still see that Michelle is striving to replace the 1 billion and 1,000 employees back.
Mm.
Well, that's that. I mean, that's how I like to read things. But if this makes more sense to a larger number of voters, then fine. I still prefer more specificity.
I think a couple of these things go hand in hand, right? By muddying the water as to which businesses pay an administrative office tax, we open up the possibility that we need to call out more specifically in the proposal that if you currently don't pay the administrative office tax, or you don't pay the gross receipts tax, you won't pay the CEO tax, for lack of a better word, right? So I could go with this change here, coupled with a little more specificity in the proposal.
Okay. Is there another word for large that, rather than jumbo, that might fit that particular area of the sentence?
Well, could we say generally applies to a large business in San Francisco? This is going to the first line in the proposal.
Oh, to mirror the language.
Yeah, that would help.
So what do you want to do, Michelle, on the first?
In the proposal, generally applies to a large business.
I wouldn't say that, because the tax applies not, the use of the term large business is isolated to administrative office tax. Gross receipts tax applies to everyone. The proposition here is going to apply to some, but it's not really based on the size of the business. It's based on the compensation ratio.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
Well, no, Jenica, it's a twofold thing, right? You have to be subject to...
Well, the rate will be tied. The rate will be tied, but it varies. Some people who pay gross receipts tax will pay one rate, depending on their executive ratio. Some businesses, and the businesses that apply have the administrative office tax, will pay a different rate.
That makes it very, so let's say, I have to look at the language, Jenica, but maybe you could help me with this. I run a business with 5 employees in San Francisco, and I'm an extremely successful business person. And so I have gross receipts for my business of $100 million a year. And the median salary for my employees is, really low. And my compensation is 100 times those extremely low employee median compensation. Is my business subject to this new tax?
You have to have over 1,000 employees, right?
No. This is the gross receipts, not the administration office.
Sorry, yeah.
Yes, you are.
So there is no small business exemption, or I need to
There
read
is,
that.
but you don't clear it because you make 100 million in gross receipts. You need to be underneath the threshold for the gross receipts tax. You need to make below, it's either 1.17 million, I believe, where we're at around right now for the gross receipts threshold. If you as a small business you qualify under the exemption for gross receipts, you won't pay. But under the hypothetical you posed, yes, you would pay because of the gross receipts amount you proposed.
But there is a circumstance, admittedly rare, where somebody could run a business whose gross receipts are below the threshold, but whose compensation for the top executive is 100 times the median compensation of the employees.
They are exempt. If the overall gross receipts are below the threshold, then the ratio doesn't matter.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. I was getting lost.
Yep.
Thank you. We're fine.
It's okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that's
This is
why I would
always
suggest
Luke Teresa.
that I would suggest because to the extent that we're going to move on, start talking about a small business exemption reference, be very careful to make sure that reference is tied to the gross receipts tax bullet. There is no call out exemption for administrative office tax. That either applies or does not. And so it really only applies to jumbo businesses. There's no call out.
Yeah.
And a small business would never be subject to administrative office because they're not a jumbo. Just by their nature, they don't have 1,000 employees. They don't have over $1 billion in gross receipts. But for gross receipts tax, there's an express call out. And so the small business exemption and your reference should be tied to that. And you can keep it pretty simple. You could just say certain small businesses would not pay this tax.
So a couple of things. I think that we should go back to Michelle's original language and be specific in the way it is now. Instead of large business, go back to where we call out 1,000 employees, $1 billion in payroll. Because we're going to it gets really messy.
Yeah, I agree. I think the average voter, then it sets the stage for the average voter that this applies to these people.
Yeah, I have one question, and I don't want to cloud things. I'm hoping can a business pay both gross receipts tax and administrative office tax, or is it one or the other?
No, it is one or the
I
other.
think it's one or the other.
So I don't think this might make just a little difference, but it might help, is the second paragraph maybe saying other businesses, or somehow, I didn't get that. That it was, that these two are, it's a one or the other situation. You either pay one, you pay the other, or you're, exempt in some way.
Could we change the A to the for the business that pays the gross receipts tax? Would that show that there's two different taxes? Or two different taxes?
I don't know that makes, I appreciate the effort. I'm not sure that changes it. I just didn't, it's something that I just realized. So I'm just trying to kind of make sense of that too.
So we're
I'm a little worried that as we start trying to explain the existing tax code, that we're going to get we're going to lose the story for the sake of too much information.
Yeah,
and
agreed.
that I think that, the way I understand this is if you pay this tax, you may be subject to the CEO tax if you meet this additional executive pay ratio thing. That's how I see this.
I see it as if the top executive pays 100 times more than its employees, then this tax applies.
Yeah.
Period.
Only when they are already paying
More than
a gross receipts tax or an administrative office tax. So the payment of the gross receipts and administrative office tax are necessary but not sufficient conditions for the new CEO tax.
Right.
Right.
No,
It's more than
Betty's answer was accurate. It's not the if or only, it's that you don't have to pay gross receipts. It's just that if you do, that's the percentage that it's based on. I know that concept is difficult. I appreciate that doesn't sound as clear as it sounded in my mind now that I'm saying out loud. You guys are pressing me on the tax stuff today. Okay. I get the struggle. I think that maybe we need to sort of circle back on what is the issue that we feel like remains outstanding, because we could sit here and needle about various things, but I'm a little confused on as to what is the focus right now. Like, what specific public comment are we attempting to address?
Well, you know, we're trying to simplify the issue, and I think the issue is not all the different businesses, but the fact that the top, when the top executive pay is 100 times the compensation for its employees, then this tax would apply for these businesses.
Yeah.
That's true.
Okay. And so the issue is,
and then it's a question of how much, right? So the next bullet define. They go to the heart of the executive tax ratio. And the Legislative Digest had this horrible table where it broke it all out. And so these bullets are simply trying to say what the range of how much more could be. It's a multiplier, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, the general concept what Betty said is right. There's 100 times if the CEO, who's usually the top paid executive, but not always, which is why we don't say CEO.
Right.
If that person makes 100 times more than the median comp of all the employees that work for that company in San Francisco, you're going to pay a tax.
Yeah.
Well, the yes vote reflects what we're trying to do.
I think this is fine. You know, one of the comments was that these two bullets are too complicated or they're worded awkwardly. I think maybe they're worded awkwardly for a reason.
That's also true.
Well, and also they're set up the way that we've done this before, which I have found helpful before, which is they set the condition that's different at the beginning.
That's right.
Right. And that is a flag for what's to come. So you can just, for under this one thing, this is how it goes. Under this other thing, this is how it goes. And I find that structure very clear and helpful. And I like the order of things. I know I think there's some, there's a lot of stuff in the middle that's repetitive, that sometimes when we do bullets, we rewrite bullets to kind of take out the repetitive stuff. I think it's okay here since it's just the two bullets. So we have that if its top manager pay is more than 100 times employee pay, that part in the little comma set aside is repetitive. We could move that out somehow, but I like it where it is, and I don't see moving it would actually make it clearer in kind of how the rewrite went in my head.
I think the bullets are fine. Yeah. I think what we need to do is look at and simplify the first sentence, which says proposition blank. And I would suggest that we just go down to the yes vote and say you want to replace an additional tax on some businesses in San Francisco when the highest paid managerial employee earns more than 100 times the median compensation paid to their employees, and then go into what it becomes. I mean, I think that the whole, you want to create a tax that applies, and I think that just is terribly confusing to the voter. And we've simplified it in the yes vote. I don't know why. Michelle's done a great job, and both Michelle and the deputy attorney have done a great job of simplifying it in the yes vote. So why have we complicated it in the opening line of the proposal?
Well, there is one reason, and that is that in the proposal we call out that the revenue has to be in San Francisco. Like, there's this locus of the tax, right? For its employees in San Francisco.
In the yes vote, it says for their employees in the city.
Yeah. Okay. That's right.
Well, what-
I'd like to see what Betty is suggesting. So if we could, Peter, copy the yes vote, maybe not replace it in the proposal, but copy it over, and then we just make those changes, and we can see if that is clearer and still accurate. Because we feel like it's accurate in the yes vote, and I don't see them saying anything different, and I think we just need to add our parens and stuff like that.
Okay, so
Yeah, I would start with to place, yeah.
would place an additional tax on some businesses when they're highest paid. Then we would, when they're top man, well.
We have to add the parens after highest paid managerial employee. Let's not debate managerial versus executive yet. So top manager pay.
Times the.
And then we would call out the parens after city.
Top manager pay? No, wait, it's more than employee pay?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. Additional tax on some businesses when they're highest paid top manager pay.
We can change city back to San Francisco.
Yeah. Let's see. Wait.
And then we can change it in the yes vote to match it if we decide to keep this.
Paid manager employee.
When we said it's employees, do we need to say in San Francisco there? Because that couples employees with and couples.
It's not their employees everywhere. It's their employees specifically in San Francisco. Yeah. And it's compensation. It's not just pay. There's a whole definition of compensation that is salary and other benefits and et cetera, which is on the word you need to know for me.
Compensation, right. Paid.
My theory is we just need to make this as simple as possible for the reader to understand, and that we were certainly starting to get into the complicated side of things, talking about highest paid.
Yeah. Okay. And I really appreciate the point that we were basically saying the same thing in the yes vote as we were in this first paragraph, and having the matches, I think, useful when we can do it. We've done that before. If there was something else that we were explaining, obviously, then it could be different, but we weren't doing anything different.
And we explained in the bullets the differentials. So, I think it fits. It's just my personal opinion. But I was looking at it thinking, they've done such a great job with the yes vote. Why are we playing all these games with the proposition?
One thing I'm noticing is in the newer version we just worked on, we use their instead of its. Proposition blank would place an additional tax on some businesses in San Francisco when they're highest paid. Peter has it highlighted.
Yeah, well, it's plural businesses, right?
Right.
We sometimes.
Well, that's a business. Then
there makes more sense here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just depends on whether you say a business or some business.
Yeah, I just wanted to just check on that.
Okay, great. Okay.
So Betty, I like this, and I think we can delete the other version.
Yeah, sure. Now, do you want to say would place or an additional? Huh.
I'm fine with would place. I mean, we could go Proposition Bank would create, but
do we have to call out that it's new, that it's being created?
No, it's an additional.
No, okay.
Additional to me is all encompassing.
Okay.
So the other suggestion that affects this section is the idea of moving from managerial and manager to executive. I'm fine with that. While we've been chatting, I looked back over the legislative text.
Except that the supervisor was talking about it was taken from the executive pay rates. So
it is, executive is used throughout the legislative text, managerial is actually used less often somehow. I think we have to define it no matter what. I think maybe using the word executive means that we don't have to use the awkward word managerial, so that's something.
Or highest paid executive.
I say an executive period, yeah, I mean.
Well, so you're saying highest paid executive employee and then top
without
executive pay?
Without employee. So the suggestion, as I understood it, was when they're highest paid executive, parens, top executive pay. Because we're using a term that's in the legislative text, and then there is another term used in the legislative text. So it's.
Well, if it makes it easier to understand, you could just leave the managerial employee and then in the parens say top executive pay. I mean, they're interspersed, and one person might understand executive and another managerial. So I don't know whether that's more confusing or not, but it's one way to get around it.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could define executive as
because we understand it is based on the executive pay rate. So
I think you need to change top manager pay to top executive pay in each of the bullets too, to see how this plays.
Yeah. Okay.
You can always go back.
Top executive pay, all right. Okay.
I mean, I do know that sometimes there are managers who make more money than the top CEO, but that's also based on overtime, et cetera, and not on the pay itself. So.
Okay.
Yeah, especially comes in when you consider all compensation.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, Betty, under your hypothetical, that person would be the top, but there's nothing wrong about the shorthand. You've defined it as highest paid managerial employee. Pay will include all compensation. Compensation will be defined in the words you need to know.
So you would just take out the top executive pay?
No, I'd leave it as is. I think that's. I think it's good.
Okay. All right. Are we fairly well? Now, I think that the last point have we solved the small business concern here for both the supervisor and Lauren?
I heard the suggestion to add something specific, calling it out. That's still something I would like to see, but I understand that that's not the full committee's vote. So
the problem is it's very particular. The small business exemption applies in some circumstances, to the gross receipts tax only. We really are starting to.
Could you solve it? But
to address that, my sentence could instead say certain small businesses who are subject to the gross receipts tax may be exempt from this tax.
No, I would put it after that bullet and say some small businesses are exempt, because that's where it is, the gross receipts tax.
No, not there. At the end of the first bullet, Peter.
Yeah, the end of the first bullet?
Yeah, that's where I would put it, because that's where it is. That's where it applies.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh. Some small businesses
would be
some. Okay.
From this additional tax.
Okay.
That is legally correct.
Okay.
It's confusing, but it's legally correct, and it seems
from this additional tax.
It seems to solve the problem of people who feel like some of the small business people may go into cardiac arrest.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this works really well with what we've left in the way it is now, which calls out all this stuff about administrative office tax and size, but the gross receipts tax doesn't have that size implications. So it's a receipts thing. You could be a small, tiny shop of very few employees, but have wonderful revenue and have to pay gross receipts tax. To Scott's earlier point, And the example he so helpfully outlined that kind of like solidified this.
Okay, that works for me. Yeah.
I think the one of the things also, or the final thing on my list, I saw that the Supervisor Haney concerned himself with, which is substantial, is he was talking about the straightforward on the revenue, that maybe we overemphasized the revenue. I don't know that I think it's up to the committee, but yeah, we spelled out state law limits the amount of revenue. Do we really need, I guess, do we really need that in there? But
I think legally, I think it's, the original version said state's limit. It is a limit imposed by the state. I mean, it's not wrong to omit that. It just says there's a limit.
does it apply to this measure though, Jenica?
The GAN limit? Yes. Yes, it does. And this is changing that.
Okay.
So,
well, if that's the case, then.
and I can't remember where we settled with our prior measures, but I was tracking the language that you had recently approved. And so earlier digests that have that, you can start to see there's a pattern with our references to the GAN limit. We include one reference in the way it is now, and then we include a subsequent reference in the proposal. And so I was tracking that language. So that state's limit language came from a prior, most recently adopted digest.
Okay. All right. Then I think we've maybe handled that question. Is there any other thoughts that we listened to from all the people who called in? I think we've simplified it for them. I think that was one of the more major things they were concerned about, that we allow the voter to understand that this is an additional tax that can be used for. Do we need to say it goes into the general fund, or is that just kind of, do we, if we say, do we need to say that goes into the general fund to help the voter understand, or is that just pretty much understood?
I think that's understood.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we need to call out these questions, which is why I keep bringing them up.
No, I really appreciate that, Betty.
I think then if the.
So before we go, I need to ask Jenica a question.
Okay.
Are you there? I'm trying to get my head around the exemption, right? And that we're saying it correctly, okay? Because what we're saying is that any business that has an executive compensation ratio of 100:1 or greater, more
than 100,
is subject to the new executive tax, right? And that the exception would be if a business does not pay gross receipts tax, they would not have to pay the executive tax.
No.
That's how I read it.
No.
When I go to
have we complicated it by putting in this statement then? The small business pays the gross receipts tax. They don't pay the administrative office tax, which is why we put it there. But if it complicates the whole issue itself, then maybe we.
Well, you see, I look at the exemption provision on page 6, lines 8 through 25, Jenica, and in particular lines 22 to 25, 3304 Part D. Article 33 is the executive tax. And I see a person or combined group exempt from the gross receipts tax as a small business enterprise under a separate part of the code shall also be exempt from taxation under this Article 33.
I mean, I appreciate what you're getting at. You're trying to understand the scenario where a small business could end up paying this tax when they're otherwise exempt from gross receipts, right?
Right.
No, I'm
Oh,
trying to
go ahead.
actually narrow the field to say only businesses that are exempt from gross receipts would be exempt. So you could have a small business with a ratio of 100 to 1 that is not exempt from the gross receipts tax, and it would pay the new tax. And you could have a business that meets the threshold of 101, but is not subject to paying gross receipts tax. They would not pay the new tax.
I mean, the issue is that, and this is why it gets more complicated, is that there are multiple exemptions, existing exemptions to gross receipts
I know.
that are not reflected in here. And that's why that's why the city attorney's draft did not dive into this subject.
That's what I'm getting to here. I think that
We should leave it out.
I don't know, when we say some small businesses would be exempt from this additional tax, it begs the question, well, what small businesses? And that we can't answer without getting into the weeds of this. Because it's not so simple.
I appreciate that it's not simple, but I think it's fine. We don't always get into the weeds, and we sometimes just say certain things sometimes happen.
Yeah.
It's raising the point. And, you know, if people want to read the legislative text and get into tax code, they can go there. And if someone wants to make a valid argument expanding on it, that's something they could do.
Mm-hmm.
Michelle,
But I think raising it is helpful for voters.
Yeah.
But I see that it is a complicated thing. But, you know, we do the hedging language a lot of times for that reason.
Yeah, but
Michelle,
we don't go into all the.
It says some. So.
Some,
Sh-
yeah,
Mi-
because I mean, I think that the point is that we just point it out, but we don't have to go through an exhaustive list of possible scenarios.
This is not, I mean, this whole section, there are some, it's tricky. And this is why
it was omitted.
This is why we did not include it in the first
Right.
iteration that you saw. So I appreciate the grappling.
So Scott, you would take it out.
I would.
Lauren, you would leave it in.
I would.
Michelle?
I would leave it in.
Okay, there it is. We have nobody to break a tie if I would go with Scott. So
Oh,
I will go with the committee.
That's fine.
Okay,
That's fine.
all right.
I love our passion.
I think then that we are ready for a vote. Reading.
Can everyone hear me?
We
Yes.
can.
All right. The way it is now, the city collects a tax on gross receipts tax, parens, from some businesses in San Francisco at a rate from 0.16% to 0.65% annually. Businesses with more than $1 billion in gross receipts, 1,000 employees nationwide, and administrative offices in San Francisco pay an administrative office tax parens based on their payroll expense instead of their gross receipts. This tax rate is 1.4% of their payroll expense. State law limits the amount of revenue, including tax revenue, the city can spend each year. State law authorizes San Francisco voters to approve increases to this limit to last for 4 years. The proposal. Proposition blank would place an additional tax on some businesses in San Francisco when their highest paid managerial employee, top executive pay, parens, earns more than 100 times the median compensation paid to their employees in San Francisco. Employee pay, parens. Bullet, for a business that pays the gross receipts tax, if its top executive pay is more than 100 times employee pay, the business would pay an additional tax from 0.1% to 0.6% of its San Francisco gross receipts. Some small businesses would be exempt from this additional tax. Bullet. For a business that pays the administrative office tax, if its top executive pay is more than 100 times employee pay, the business would pay an additional tax from 0.4% to 2.4% of its San Francisco payroll expense. Proposition blank would also increase the limit on the city's annual tax revenue spending by the amount of additional taxes collected under the proposed tax. The increased limit would last for 4 years. A yes vote means if you vote yes, you want to place an additional tax on some businesses in San Francisco when their highest paid managerial employee earns more than 100 times the median compensation paid to their employees in the city. A no vote means if you vote no, you do not want to make this change.
And before we have a vote, I would like to make the statement that I'm taking an executive decision. The changes from the new posting that given to us was fairly minor, and we were asked to table this motion, but I think because of the minor changes from the old text that was posted to the new text that was posted could certainly be accommodated in a reconsideration. So I am not tabling this. I am asking for a motion to adopt.
I move we adopt as drafted.
I will remind the chair that.
Yes, I know.
Excellent. Thank you.
I know. I'm asking for a second.
I second the motion.
And I will call the roll. Scott, do you approve or disapprove?
Approve.
Michelle?
Yay.
Lauren? Do you?
Aye, yeah, yes. I'm not sure which one.
And I approve as read. The digest therefore is approved for today. There is a reconsideration process. We ask that if you would like for us to change or reconsider any part of this digest, that you put in writing exactly what you would like for us to reconsider and change, and post it to our the website that will be listed in a minute on on our post it to its information. It's called publications at sfgov.org by 4 p.m. tomorrow, which is the July 29th, 2020. We then will take this up for reconsideration, hopefully on Thursday, unless there is a problem. So please put into written words exactly what you would like for us to say and send to publications at sfgov.org by 4 p.m. tomorrow. And we will then reconsider them. And I think that will cover the fact that we had two separate pieces that we worked from today. The sheriff's measure is lengthy, and I know that we're going to have several people who need to comment. So would we like to take a break so we can, before we come back for the police staffing, because I know that Scott has done a great job on it, but it's going to also require lots of public comment. So would you? And it right now is 11:42. So would we like to break until, for instance, 12:15, and give us a chance to walk around and maybe get a bite to eat, or at least get something to drink.
Yeah, I think enough time to eat, given how.
Is that enough time, or would you like to come back at 12:30?
Well, I've got a call from like 12 to 12:30.
So you would like for us to wait till 12:30 so you could come back, right?
If no one else minds.
I don't know.
Otherwise, I could multitask.
That gives us a few extra moments to take a deep breath and get ready for what probably will be some needed concentration for this measure that Scott has presented for us, or will be presenting for us. So we will then recess until 12:30.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Peter?
Hi, Betty. Can you hear me? I'm gonna. All right, we all set.
Am I back on?
Yep.
All right. The Ballot Simplification Committee is back into session at 12:36, meeting to consider the legislation for police staffing. This particular measure has been assigned to Scott Patterson, and we're going to let him take the lead on it. Scott?
Hi, thank you, Betty. So my reading of the charter amendment is that the amendment tries to accomplish two things. It tries to change the criteria for the amount of full duty sworn officers in the department and the mechanism by which that number is determined. And the second thing it tries to do is civilianize, that's my word for it, I think we need a better, civilianize the police department more. And Lauren, do you have a question?
We haven't done a reading.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that now that Scott has set the basis for it, we can have a reading so that those listening online can understand and take into consideration the 2 points that Scott was trying to make regarding the legislation. Peter, could you give us a reading?
Yep. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
The way it is now, the charter requires the San Francisco Police Department, SFPD, to have at least 1,971 full-duty sworn police officers. The charter also requires the SFPD to maintain a minimum number of full-duty sworn police officers for neighborhood policing and patrol. This minimum number must be equal to the number of police officers assigned to these functions in 1993 through 94. The San Francisco Police Commission, oversees the SFPD. Among other duties, the Police Commission approves the SFPD's budget. The proposal, Proposition blank, would amend the charter to remove the requirement that the SFPD maintain a minimum of 1,971 full-duty sworn police officers. Proposition blank would also remove the requirement that SFPD maintain a minimum number of full-duty sworn police officers for neighborhood policing and patrol assignments. Under Proposition blank, the Chief of Police would instead provide a report to the Police Commission regarding recommended staffing levels for full-duty sworn police officers. The Police Commission would be required to hold a public hearing on that report when it considers the SFPD's proposed budget. A yes vote means if you vote yes, you want to remove the charter requirement that the San Francisco Police Department maintain a minimum of 1,971 full-duty sworn police officers and a minimum number of full-duty sworn police officers for neighborhood policing and patrol. A no vote means if you vote no, you do not want to make these changes.
And I just generally will throw out the fact that we keep being asked from people, then why does something like this need to be on the ballot when in fact it seems to be a housekeeping or a problem of those departments that they could handle there. But the point is that this was a vote by the voters in a charter amendment, and only a charter amendment can be changed by the voter. Anything passed by the voter must be changed by the voter. And since this was a charter amendment, this needs to be another charter amendment to show that there is a change. So, Scott, it's yours.
Now we're ready. So, two things. The mechanisms by which the amount of full duty police officers are determined in a given year, and the civilianizing of the police department by converting full duty sworn officer positions to civilian positions. Now, my draft deals primarily with the first one of those because that's what the city attorney gave us. And what I really am trying to do is sort of take away the details of the mechanism. Under some circumstances, the chief reports once a year. On some, it's every other year. On some cases, it's odd numbered years. In some cases, it's even number of years. The mechanism is we're going to do away with these hard number requirements and replace it with a reporting from the chief to the police commission as part of the police commission's budget process. So that's the mechanism around this sort of first. And so how I wrote this dealt mainly with that mechanism. I don't know if the committee wants to take up this civilianation clause because it's already existing in current law. And so if you look at page 4 of the charter text, line 15 to 17, this is in the law. It says, positions in the police department may only be converted from sworn to civilian as they become vacant. No sworn officer shall be laid off in order to convert a position to civilian personnel. That doesn't change, right, in this law, but there is a lot of language that is eliminated around it, right, because they're doing away with the hard number requirement. So I call it out to you. I chose to leave it out because I thought it was just, explaining how this charter amendment would work relative to the civilian staffing clause in the charter. And so what I've provided is, I think, a very bare bones version of the city attorney's recommended language. The only question I had for the city attorney is in relation to the notion of full duty sworn police officers. I started to replace that with full time, and then I realized, oh wait, full duty might have a specific meaning in this context. Is that true, Andrew?
Yeah, so that's certainly something that we looked at. So full duty does mean something different than full time. So full duty means people are actually available to carry out the duties of police officers. So for example, if an officer's on leave, they wouldn't count towards the full duty.
So I have one change I would like the committee's tolerance to change immediately because it is a typo. And that is in the proposal where I say the number of full-time sworn police officers, that should be full duty sworn police officers. So Peter, can you go ahead and make that change? Because I had done it to full-time and then I didn't catch all of them. So that's what I got. This is what I came up with. I invite modification. Thank you.
This is so minor. Shouldn't charter be initial cap, or is it?
Michelle, I had a similar suggestion. What we've done in other digests to make it clear for the voters is the city charter, capital C, and then parens charter.
Oh, right.
Yeah, we solved that the other day.
Right, yeah.
I think that was an elegant solution then and remains so.
Exactly.
And we use the charter down to the yes vote anyway.
Charter, yeah.
Right, and then, subsequent references.
Okay, cool.
And then when we do the yes vote, sometimes there we wouldn't use the parens, we would say the city charter, just since sometimes people just skip right ahead to the yes.
Yeah.
Anything else that we're looking at? I mean, that seems to be style.
Yeah, so just another style thing around parens. So yesterday we had a great conversation about, instead of using SFUSD, saying school district. And it struck me that that is something we could do here. Instead of saying SFPD, we could say police department as the parens.
Excellent. Yeah,
I like that. No,
Mm-hmm.
although SFPD is pretty generally understood, but
This might be helpful for folks, you know, who are, you know, English second language kind of
Right,
thing.
yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
This one at the end of the second paragraph and the way it is now too. Yeah.
That's all I had in the way it is now, except just more of a substance thing there. So sometimes, and this is just an observation again, I couldn't find the number. You know, oftentimes in the way it is now in this kind of digest, we actually talk about the number of employees that are current. So I wasn't sure if that, I don't know that that has merit here. And I know that that number itself is kind of an interesting issue. So I did look at that. I just wanted to just raise that for the committee. And then Betty, you had another comment before that was a bit substantive that I wanted to circle back to. So you were pointing out that this is something that San Francisco voters, this number, this minimum number, is something that San Francisco voters approved. And I think we could explain that here. So at the beginning of the way it is now, we could say in 1994, San Francisco voters approved a change to the city charter that requires, and it would explain why this exists, that it was the will of the voters in 1994.
I'm not, that's fine. I'm not entirely sure that 94 is the date. So be sure to check that and get the right date is all.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, that's what my research showed, but I would appreciate confirmation from Andrew, who we've got right now.
Yeah, that's what I saw as well.
Okay.
Initial number came in through a 94 charter amendment.
So Peter, let's type that out in so folks can look at it. So in 1994, San Francisco voters approved a change to and then lowercase the, and then after the parens, that requires. Or requiring.
I think that allows the voter to know why this is on the ballot. Because, you know, this is the kind of thing people stop me all the time and say, why are we even voting for this? Well, because you did it. You're the one that made the change.
You were the 1994 version of you, yes. So Betty, does this address what you raised before? Because I really liked your point.
Yeah, I think that helps.
Okay, so that is everything I had for that section.
You know, Scott, I think you've done a great job of distilling this into a nice, succinct digest.
Yeah.
Well, once again, I had a very, very good digest to work from, and that makes it very, very easy.
That's true.
So the proposal.
Yeah. Does anybody have anything to add to the proposal?
I have a question. I don't know if something belongs, but in the first paragraph.
You need a period.
Oh yeah, well, yeah, it needs a period. It says a minimum number of full duty sworn police officers and a minimum number of full duty officers. So the second type is not a sworn police officer? Is that, or is it just a shorthand the second time?
No, I think that I have to look, but I think the neighborhood ones need not be sworn.
Okay.
But let me check.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just.
Let me find it.
These mouthfuls get so confusing.
No, it should be full duty sworn officers.
Both places. Right?
Yeah, it's line 16 to 19 on page 3. The number of full duty sworn officers in the police department dedicated to neighborhood policing and patrol for fiscal year shall not be reduced in future years, and all new fully duty sworn officers.
Yeah, okay.
And so
It was a typo on my part.
yeah, if you don't mind me weighing in a little bit on this. Yeah, so it does say sworn officers in the charter, and it's something that I did struggle with as well, as Scott probably did, and sort of putting this together, because there's this sort of repetitive full duty sworn police officers phrase.
Yeah.
You're very tempted to shorten, but then you also don't want to create inconsistency. So it's a kind of a difficult call there.
It's the same thing with the sheriff.
Okay.
You know,
You could create a parens shorthand. And just instead of saying full duty sworn police officers every time, we could just parens it and say sworn officers.
But that's, but in the proposal, that's the only place we have it. We do have it up in the way it is now.
I would since it is so important to what this charter amendment does, I would leave it and make it very clear that this is not about all the employees in the police department, that this is not about non-sworn employees of the police department. And so, you know, the idea that it's full duty has a particular meaning in this context. And then that they have to be sworn, and I don't think you can get away from the word officer. So I think just to say sworn officer is not enough, especially with the sheriffs with sworn deputy. And so I think that you need to leave full duty sworn officer, even though it is kind of awkward.
Do we need to say police officers the second time there, or can we leave it out? Because we haven't repeated the full mouthful.
Police officer.
And if we're saying we can't use a shorthand or aren't going to define a shorthand, it seems like that word is missing there.
I'll leave it up to you folks. You know, I had my take on it.
Yeah.
I don't forget it's a way that we've solved this problem before. There might be other ways to solve that problem.
Well, I think Scott put it pretty succinctly.
Huh. Wow.
Maybe we're not ready to make this discussion because so much of it is going to have to be within the context of what does get included and excluded from this digest.
Yeah,
You know,
let's go back to this.
yeah, it could be something we consider maybe after public comment.
Chief of police.
I'll put a pin in it on my little list.
Yeah, and Bet, if you don't mind, I can add a little bit further context to the 94 charter amendment for the committee.
Okay. All right.
Just to be clear, I did just quickly look it up. So this was Proposition D on the June 94 ballot. And also to clarify that in terms of that charter amendment, it established the 1971 number, but it also did speak to the neighborhood policing minimum staffing as well. So it spoke to both of those issues.
It did, but this only speaks to the numbers, correct?
Right. Basically, this charter amendment would take away both of those minimums, the 1971 minimum and the minimum with respect to neighborhood policing and patrol. Both of those came into the 94 charter amendment, and both of those would be taken out by this measure.
Okay.
Okay.
So I don't know if you think that may require some tweaking to the first sentence of the way it is now, because the second sentence was also made as a result of the 94 charter amendment, but I think that's up to the committee's discretion.
I think, yeah, thank you, Andrew. I see what you're saying there. So just to then, so we could say, rather than making it one long sentence, which I would like to avoid, maybe we could say that change to the charter also required.
Or you could do bullets. You could do colon, then 2 bullets, sort of saying here are the 2 pieces of the 94 charter amendment.
Right. That's a possibility.
So you could say that requires colon, first bullet, and then convert the second sentence to another bullet. That'd be another way to go about it.
Or you could say the city charter requires and give up the in 1994 language as well.
Right. Also correct, I think.
Yeah, I like the bullet idea, and actually we could put the San Francisco Police Department part in that introduction to the bullet where it define it there. So the first line that requires the San Francisco Police Department to, have, capital H, at least, and then a semicolon at the end of that, and, sorry, I'm on the bullet. To have, and then to maintain. It's a lot shorter. We need the word "and" at the end of the first bullet.
Could you repeat that, please?
After the semicolon on the first bullet, we need the word "and."
Now, I need to ask you if that is terribly important. Do we need to say that, since it really, that second part does not reflect what the change is? As part of the chair, I need the committee to know, to put into the digest exactly what is there. So,
No, the charter change does address both of these issues specifically.
all right, okay,
Which is why I put both in the way it is now.
okay, that's
How you want to say it the way it is now? I'm cool any way y'all want to do it.
all right. Anything else in the proposal? In the yes vote?
So in the proposal, so I believe that this is also in the second paragraph under proposition blank, the chief of police would provide. I believe it's a requirement. So the chief of police would be required to provide. Sometimes we emphasize that kind of level of mandatoriness.
Actually, the reason that I didn't, I had a very specific reason why I didn't put required. Because he's required in certain years under certain circumstances, and it's optional in other years and other circumstances. So sometimes it's required, sometimes it's not required. And I think if you're going to say required, you're going to have to get into the mechanics of the required reporting and the mechanics of the optional reporting.
Well, you could say would sometimes be required, but that sounds kind of nasty.
I like that even worse.
I know.
Because, you know, I think that the story here is we're moving from a hard line to a negotiated line. And the chief of police is going to say, here's how we're staffed. Here's how I'd like to be staffed for the next 2 years. And the police commission is going to set a budget that keeps that request and any public comment from that request in mind. All right, that's the mechanism that we're moving to. Now, I'm going to guess that there's some things that are not in here, like is the police department budget a 2-year budget cycle or a 1-year budget cycle? Do they have different budget cycles for different years, for different aspects of the department? I was trying to stay away from all of that. So I thought about this, and I did leave it off for a reason. I just wanted to share that reason with you. You're more than welcome to, of course, do anything you want.
Well, I think we're called a ballot simplification committee for a reason, and Scott has addressed that. Interestingly enough, I understand that we've never been able to meet the 1,971 police officers number that we've passed before.
Yeah.
So
just then to make what Scott said, if that is the case where the committee wants to go, I think the additions are helpful, but I understand that that's not the committee's opinion. We do mention annual budget in the end of the second paragraph, and Scott did say that he wanted to avoid getting into annual every 2 years. So maybe we can take the word annual out there.
Sure.
I think he has to make an annual report, doesn't he?
No.
No, the report is every 2 years. The budget is redecided every year.
But that's what I mean. It's complicated then.
The reporting is where the complication is,
Right.
right? And then sometimes it's required, sometimes it's not required, but yet invited, right? So
I see what you're saying. Okay.
you could say budget request rather than annual budget request. This is Andrew's not on at the moment. I don't think it much matters to the voter.
I agree. I don't think annual versus every 2 years matters much.
I think we could say department's budget request.
Right.
Makes it nice and clean.
Yeah.
Right.
And ultimately, if they change how they do their budget request or when they do it, then we still stay, right?
Right.
It gets out of that mechanism thing. Okay. I was looking at I feel like the second sentence, it's so much cleaner than before. And I'm just looking at it where we talk about the police commission would be required to consider this report and any public comment on the report. I was trying to figure out a way to even clean that up a little bit more. One option, the police commission would be required to consider this report and related public comment when reviewing the police department's budget. I think that's simpler and says the same thing, but Scott, what do you think?
The required public comment is from the commission. Nothing in the charter amendment precludes the chief from seeking public comment.
I don't believe my rewrite got to that. Maybe it would help to see my rewrite. I wasn't changing how required applies in the sentence. So,
Can you repeat it, please?
Yeah, the police commission would be required to consider this report and related public comment when reviewing the police department's budget request.
Oh, I just think
it's shorter and takes out a bit of the complexity, I think, but if the committee feels otherwise.
I think it's less understandable than the way we're looking at it now, which is Scott's comments. I think related public comment, you're just.
Well, that's a bit vague.
I'm sorry, Michelle?
That's a bit vague. I mean, if it were explicitly tied to the report, I think it would be more comprehensible.
So, and public comment on the report, repeating the word report?
Sure, yeah, because related, I mean, that could be just about anything.
We can restore that.
Yeah. Not, but it's.
And then take out the word related, Peter.
Public comment on the, yeah.
Betty, if you don't mind, could I make a small suggestion?
I would be happy.
Yeah, here.
I don't like this. Okay.
So I think it's certainly up to the committee's discretion, but I wonder if we really need to be explicit that the police commission needs to consider the report.
I know.
Because we do say in the prior sentence, the report will be provided to the police commission. Hopefully it goes without saying the police commission will consider it. And in terms of
required to consider something is a bit of a toothless fight.
Right, and just to speak to the public comment aspect of it, what the charter amendment requires is that the police commission hold a public hearing on the report, which of course will allow the opportunity for public comment. But just to be clear about what the precise requirement is, it's to hold a public hearing.
So I called out that the commission has to consider the report because there's a bunch of language in the charter amendment that the city doesn't need to accept the report's recommendations. Right? So the commission can ignore the report. The Board of Supervisors can ignore the police commission. But that's why I put it in. So I'm okay with taking it out, but there was a reason. And so I think you need to, if you start toying a little bit, keep that in mind, that there is this mechanism by which the commission considers it, but then can ignore it. I don't know if I did that well either.
Yeah, and Scott, some of my changes may have been trying to kind of get more at that, like I said, toothless bite that seems to be the mechanism. You're required to consider it, but can't ignore it.
You know, Lauren, change it however you want. I had my cut.
Yeah, no, I
Whatever you
appreciate
want
it.
to do is good.
But I just think it's hyperbole. I just think it goes on and on and on, and the average voter looks at that and goes, really?
Mhm.
This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to say the amendment removes this and changes the numbers. And then how they get to, I mean, yes, there provides a report and that's necessary, but how they get there is I don't think necessary.
So, Betty, are you suggesting to leave the last sentence in the proposal?
I would delete. Yeah, I think we're just getting. Scott tried to dilute it, and he did a decent job. But as we continue to discuss it, I just wonder how important that really is to the voter. Do they need to know the requirements that the commission needs in order to make this report?
Yeah, I would be good at taking it out, but though to Andrew's point that one of the requirements is to hold a public hearing, which could be added to the first sentence of this paragraph. But that's an option. And would hold a public hearing.
But the chief of police doesn't, the commission does. So.
It's the police commission.
That's correct. It would be the police commission.
Yeah, it's not the chief of police, it's the police commission.
So would we,
Andrew, how important do you think that needs to be? And if you think it's important, what are your comments? What's your, you know how to slice and dice.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that a question to me? I
Yes.
think it's definitely, it's up to the committee.
Okay, let's see. Now it reads.
I mean, I think you definitely already are getting at the sort of core of this, which is, again, to take away these minimums that Scott mentioned, so that we're not tied to specific numbers.
Okay.
And there's sort of more of a process.
Okay.
I just think we can go into the mechanics of the process and just bog everybody down. That's my concept. I would take it out.
Yeah, that reads a lot
Yeah.
better without it, actually.
I'm looking at it as an 8th grade voter who would, a voter with 8th grade comprehension who would say, yeah, I could understand that.
A lot of people.
Perhaps during public comment, people will have public comment about why public comment is something they would like to see in this.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
We may have a member online from the police commission who says, no, we need it in there. And then they may be happy it's not in there. So, all right. Anything?
I am going to step in here. I really disagree with this.
Okay.
I think it needs to be in there.
All right.
Because it is the nature of the mechanism, right? And the public comment piece is specifically called out. I would leave it in.
All right. Well, how would you leave it in? The way you say the police commission would be required to hold a public hearing when it considers the SFPD's proposed budget. Is that what you would say?
I don't remember. I have to go back to my language.
That's what you said. What you said technically was the police commission would be required to hold a public hearing on that report when it considers the police department's proposed budget.
Exactly.
So you would just leave it there.
The police commission would be required to consider this report and any public comments on the report when it considers the SFPD's budget request.
The sentence that Scott does not speak to the requirement to hold a public hearing, merely that any public comment would need to be considered. So it is slightly different to me. So another sentence we could use would be the police commission would be required to hold a public hearing. It could be about the report. It could wind up being about a whole bunch of other stuff, the way public comment goes.
Well, I would just say when it considers the
Another option.
Yeah, I would just, if you want to, so you would end it would be required to hold a public hearing, period.
To hold a public hearing on the report.
Sure, say on the report. And then I think we need to call out that this report needs to be considered in the budgetary process of the city's commission.
Okay. And then I change SFPD to police department since we've done that. Well, no, we left it SFPD. Okay.
Here's the language, right? The police commission shall consider the most recent report in its consideration and approval of the police department's proposed budget every fiscal year, but the commission shall not be required to accept or adopt any of the recommendations in the report.
Okay.
That's the language from the so the whole.
Well, they may be required to do it, but they don't have to do anything with it. So I still find that sentence.
Well, the thing is, they have to consider it. They shall consider it. So it's a requirement to consider. They can't just ignore it, is what I'm trying to get at with this.
They have to consider it. They just don't have to take anything from it.
Exactly. It's a very weird. I'm just. I don't know. Maybe we need to. I don't know. I thought it was important. Because it's,
okay. All right.
so if we could figure out a way to keep it in somehow, I think it would read. I think the.
I'm looking at which I was going to bring up in public comment. Peter, did you post today the letter that we got from the supervisor's office from Caitlin?
Yep. Yeah. Both of them.
It's posted. Yeah. All right.
But those are public comment, Betty, right?
Yeah. But
Okay.
yeah.
So let's consider those then.
So I'm looking at that, and there's a place in there. So I'm just checking to make sure he posted it. So, and we got it. So we're going to leave it as this: the police commission will be required to hold a public hearing on the report. Okay.
Are we going to consider it as part of the budgetary deliberations, though, or is that something different?
I agree with that we don't to leave it out, the budgetary.
Oh, okay.
I think I don't know. It is the way in which we're going to decide how many officers there are.
Yeah.
The writing of a report decides nothing about how many officers there are. What's happening is the police chief's going to write a report. The police commission is going to invite public comment on that report, and the police commission is going to consider the report and the associated public comment when setting the budget for the police department. That's the mechanism right there. Those three things. So I think however you want to say it, the digest needs to identify that that's the mechanism. So if you want to break it into 3 discrete sentences, cool.
Okay.
This is a little tough, as Betty said. I know there's some suggestions in public comment for how to resolve this issue and language that could help.
Yeah. So I was going to say, why don't we leave this and come back to it after we listen to public comment? So.
Yeah.
All right, then should we have a reading before public comment?
You
Peter?
didn't look at the yes vote, Betty?
I thought we did. It's exactly the same as the proposal.
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry, I didn't realize we had done that.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
All right. The way it is now, in 1994, San Francisco voters approved a change to the city charter parens, that requires the San Francisco Police Department parens, bullet, to have at least 1,971 full-duty sworn police officers and, bullet, to maintain a minimum number of full-duty sworn police officers for neighborhood policing and patrol. Among its duties, the San Francisco Police Commission parens oversees the budget and staffing of the police department. The proposal, Proposition blank, is a charter amendment that would remove the requirements that the police department maintain a minimum number of full-duty sworn police officers and a minimum number of full-duty sworn police officers assigned to neighborhood policing and patrol. Under Proposition blank, the chief of police would provide a report to the police commission about the current number of full-duty sworn police officers and the number of officers recommended in the future. The police commission would be required to hold a public hearing on that report. A yes vote means if you vote yes, you want to remove the city charter requirement that the San Francisco Police Department maintain a minimum of 1,971 full-duty sworn police officers and a minimum number of full-duty sworn police officers for neighborhood policing and patrol. A no vote means if you vote no, you do not want to make these changes.
All right. Now's when we open
So,
the.
Betty?
Yes.
Sorry, I just had one very small thing in the yes vote. The word requirement, plural, as it is in the, there's two pieces.
Right.
So it's two requirements, so that should be plural.
Okay.
That's all.
All right. Now's when we open the floor to public comment. We have before us a letter that was presented by the supervisor's office. Do you all have it in front of you? I could read it. It's very quick and to read for the people who don't have it or can't find it online. The way it is now, the SF charter currently has a requirement that the city employ 1,971 full-time sworn police officers. The proposal, Proposition blank, is a charter amendment that would remove this mandatory minimum staffing level and replace it with a regular process in which the police chief submits a report and recommendation for current staffing needs to the police commission. The police commission must consider this report and recommendations when making a decision about the SFPD's budget and staffing levels. Under Proposition blank, the chief of police would provide a report to the police commission about the current number of full duty sworn officers and the number of officers recommended in the future. The police commission would be required to consider this report, but does not have to follow the report's recommendations when it considers the police department's annual budget request. A yes vote if you vote yes, you want to remove the minimum police staffing requirements and replace it with a regular process for the police commission to establish the police department's appropriate budget and staffing levels. A no vote means if you vote no, you do not want to make these changes. I don't know if you think any of her changes might help ours or not.
Betty, are we taking public comment? Because we do have someone with their hand raised.
We do, but we have this letter first, and because we have this letter, which people took the time to give us beforehand, and then we'll open it up to public comment from there. That's kind of the way it needs to be done, I think.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to.
I see hands, yes.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And there were 2 letters received in advance?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I guess what we should do is take all the public comment and then do the discussion. So I read that one because it's short. I don't see the other one, so I must not have pulled it down. You want to pull it up real quick?
I can. It's the other one from Caitlin as well. So she submitted 2 comments.
Okay.
Was the one that you read, the I guess the The PDF that I sent out last night, or the one from this morning?
No, it was last night's.
Okay, so I'll pull up this morning's.
I thought that I pulled that off this morning. Maybe it's lost here. Well, while you're finding that, let's go to public comment so we can get more on the discussion level. And have you found it yet?
I do have it. Yeah, let me
Okay.
just share it.
All right. Especially since it's a companion to the one we already have. I think it's the same thing, isn't it?
Yes, this is the one that you read, Betty. The other one was in the body of an email.
All right.
Yeah.
Red text.
Oh, that one. Okay.
Peter, can you zoom in? I can't.
Yep. Yeah. Let me know how much you need. Is this okay?
Maybe one more. Click in.
Can everyone see it?
They're pretty much changes to Scott's. No, to the sheriff's, to the attorney. All right, we can go over. We should, since we're only going to be looking at substances, perhaps I can look at it while it's online, but I think we can open the floor to public comment and see what else, because we're going to have to take all the substance levels together. So we have a hand up. I would like to announce to those people who are in the queue that if you would like to also comment, that be sure you hit *3.
Yep. Start.
Okay.
All right, the first caller.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi, it's David Pilpel. Okay, is that the current version on the screen that I'm looking at? Okay. So here are my thoughts on this. The way it is now, San Francisco voters approved a change to the city charter that requires, I might say, the city '(S) police department, and the same thing 3 lines down with among its duties, the city's police commission. Just a thought, saves a word. At the end of the,
I was going to say, basically, we're looking for substance. So,
well, we're editing a draft, and I'm making public comment. So if I could just, you've all talked for a lot. I just want to speak very briefly. Perhaps it helps. It's up to you. Okay, thanks. The first line, the way it is now, after the police department in parens, to add to that 2: and replace the 2s on the bullets, or to maintain, and shorten the bullets further. So to maintain, bullet at least 1971, bullet a minimum number, blah blah blah. To be consistent, the concept of officers for neighborhood policing and patrol in the first bullet becomes, under the proposal, officers assigned to neighborhood policing and patrol. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it is different. And then in the yes vote, it's back to officers for neighborhood policing and patrol. under the proposal, the second graph, I was toying with the chief of police would report to the police commission, but I think you're probably better off after that long discussion about the report itself that the chief of police would provide a report. So I guess that's cool. On the second line, sworn police officers and the number, I don't know if you need of officers there, but maybe it's more clear. I was thinking maybe if you just say, and the number recommended in the future. But if it's more clear to leave that with the number of officers, then again, okay. On the next sentence, the police commission would hold a public hearing on the report. I think that reads better, and I think it's, you know, also true. On a yes vote means, I think that part is correct, but I think what it's missing at the end is, and replace it with a reporting requirement about the number of officers or something along those lines, because the yes summary does properly capture removing the minimum staffing requirement, but it doesn't summarize the new reporting requirement very briefly. I think that's what I have. Thanks.
Okay, that's good. We see Caitlin online. Caitlin?
Hi, Caitlin Vibey, Supervisor Yee's office. Thank you all for your work. I really appreciate the efforts to simplify this measure and make it accessible to voters. I know you have both of the written comments I submitted for your consideration. I wanted to just provide a little context for those comments. First of which, in terms of the way it is now, you might consider that the requirement to maintain 1,971 full duty sworn police officers, set in that same year, 1994, might encapsulate the minimum that are assigned to neighborhood policing and patrol, which is the vast majority of that 1971. So might be a way to simplify, but understand that that's at the discretion of the committee. And then wanted to give some context around the suggestion to add language saying that the minimum staffing requirement would be replaced with a regular process. I think that is a way of making it clear that we're not just removing a minimum, that we're removing that minimum and replacing it with a regular process. And perhaps that gets around some of the difficulties with needing to spell out a requirement for the chief to present every 2 years, but that he may present in every year, right? So saying a regular process. And I think it's important that that's really encapsulated, not just in the proposal, but that it is also listed in the yes vote, which only references removing a minimum, but doesn't reference the regular process that would be established. So thank you for considering my comments and my written comments, and happy to be of any help that I can. Again, thanks for all your work on this. Appreciated.
Thank you very much. Anybody else in the queue? Peter?
I don't see any. Again, it's *3 if you'd like to call in.
I thought we'd had some phone calls from people who were wanting to comment, so I'm waiting.
There's only 3 in the attendee list, and I think we've heard from 2 of the 3.
I know. I don't see a third.
Yeah,
Not with their hand raised.
there's no one with their hand raised at this moment.
Okay. All right. Then public comment is closed. I think the thing that both people have enumerated is that they want us to be sure and say remove and replace. And the other thing that I thought when we were looking at this and people were talking is, are we putting too much emphasis with the bullets in the way it is now? Does that, I know, how does that reflect on the proposal? Does it give it equal standing? I mean, we're removing. So anyway, I think we need to look at the remove and replace part, because both David and Caitlin have suggested that we need to make sure that that is part of what we present to the voter.
So I'm looking over Caitlin's the email, not the PDF one, and the specific language I'm seeing that might be worth considering is it would be added at the end of the proposal.
Well, I think that's the one that Scott had that we took out. So, but I think maybe we need to look at it again.
Yeah, so what she wrote is, and replace it with a regular process by which police staffing levels are evaluated by the chief and the commission. And it goes on, but there's a specific suggestion for how to address this: repeal and replace, or remove and replace.
Okay, well, we have Scott's that would also remove, and then we have Caitlin's. So we have two specific ways to look at this. What's the committee's thought? Scott, you've already made yours, but you want to make another pitch for including your sentence as is?
And I don't think Caitlin's suggestion to add that is to replace Scott's paragraph. It's an addition to.
So it would just talk about, it would be replaced with a process to decide.
I gotta say, I just let me. I don't think. Well, the decision comes down to whether you want to say that the requirement in the city charter would be replaced by this process. The problem is it's not an apples to apples comparison, because the city charter requires a hard number. And this is now a process without a hard number. So it is not straight up apple to apple replace. Right? You're replacing a hard number with a variable process. I think the question is whether the committee sees the need to call it a replacement, and then you can figure out how you want to call it.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that, because I was looking at it and I think I do see it as a replacement, in that they're replacing one requirement with another requirement. So they're replacing an apple with an apple.
Or a different type of apple.
Yeah, Granny Smith with a Fuji, but it's one requirement being replaced with another requirement. It's not a requirement that has a number attached to it, but it is still a requirement. So I do see the remove and replace structure as being a story that could be helpful for voters to just.
Then don't argue it, make the change. What's the language, Lauren?
I read Caitlin's suggested language and offered it as a suggestion for the committee previously.
I move we accept that language. Let's put it in there.
Could you please reread it, Lauren?
At the end of the first paragraph of the proposal, and replace it with a regular process by which police staffing levels are evaluated by the chief and the commission.
The regular process by which?
Regular process by which police staffing levels are evaluated by the chief and the commission. I'm not saying we don't have to do our rewrite here. And determined based on the city's current needs. That is what Caitlin wrote in her suggestion.
So erase the next paragraph, Peter.
I wasn't suggesting to erase the next paragraph.
Well, I don't think we need it anymore, do we? There's a regular process. We spell out 2/3 of the regular process.
Wait.
We could instead change what Caitlin suggested, and just end the sentence at the end of the first paragraph after the word evaluated.
No, okay.
Wait.
No, if you're going to say evaluated, by whom? So,
Well, are evaluated.
Well, then the next paragraph could continue and say, under proposition blank, the chief of police will provide a report to the police commission that evaluates the current number of, and tie those two together and tell that story.
That's great.
One possible solution.
Let's just leave it. This looks great.
Yeah, that because I think that if you pack too much into the last sentence of the first paragraph, it might get a little bit opaque.
yeah.
So I like how this is in two distinct chunks.
Okay. So we've got the remove and the replace in there. Okay.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
All right.
I believe we need to, if we're keeping the end of the the first paragraph, last sentence in the proposal, I think chief needs to be chief of police because we haven't parensed it. And then commission needs to be police commission because we haven't, that's the parens. Again, I still think we can end this after evaluated, but I understand that it wants to be kept. So that's just to clean that up.
And in the second paragraph, it was suggested that we simply say the police commission would hold a public hearing on the report and leave out that would be required. Have we put enough required in there to take that out or leave it in?
I think we could take it out. We don't use it in the sentence before.
Take it out, Betty.
Okay.
And then I would end the paragraph above after evaluated. Put a period after evaluated. And erase the rest of that sentence.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, Lauren, what else do you want to change? And we'll do it.
Okay.
Do we need to look at the yes vote again since we changed the proposal?
Right. Yes, I think so.
That was one of the pieces of the public comment, if we wanted to consider that suggestion.
Do we just want to pair it and put, if you vote yes, you want to remove the requirements that the police department maintain a minimum number of full duty sworn police officers and a minimum number of full duty sworn police officers assigned to neighborhood policing and patrol, and replace it with a regular process by which staffing levels are evaluated? Do you think that the process is necessary in the yes vote or not?
I like how Scott simplified it in the yes vote. We don't always include everything.
I like the yes vote. I like the yes vote, but I'm simply pointing out that the public comment kept talking about remove and replace, and we've done that, but I wondered whether the committee felt that it was important to also put it into the yes vote. I personally like the yes vote. I think it's simple. I think it says what the entire measure is supposed to do if it passes, and I would not tinker with the yes vote. But that doesn't mean that the committee doesn't think so. Scott, you want to leave it, I know, right?
Well, I mean, do you think that if a person reads the yes vote, they would read about the removal, but then would the next question automatically be, and what is it replaced with? Or do we know too much about this that we would?
I don't know. That's what that's what I want the committee to consider.
So it's removing X and replacing it with Y?
Yeah.
Or X, yeah.
And I'm wondering about regular process. Isn't there an easier way to say that so that we don't have to explain it to the 8th grader?
Right.
Could we just say process and take out the regular?
And replace it with wow.
It's the by which that really makes it sound a little falutin.
Yeah. Oh.
How about replace it with
evaluating?
With just turning that around, evaluating police staffing levels, or
yeah, a regular process that evaluates police staffing levels. Yeah.
Replace it with a okay.
Just can we leave out the regular process? I'm trying to figure that out here.
And replace it with
a process.
And process evaluating police staffing levels?
Sure.
Or something like that.
And just an evaluation.
Or?
How about replace it by evaluating police staffing levels? No.
Sure.
Well, you got to replace it with something, not with something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind, Betty, maybe I can make a suggestion. Maybe replace it with regular evaluations of police staffing levels.
There you go. That takes the process out of the park. Yes.
Mm-hmm. There was one comment that did jump out at me. We say assigned to in this paragraph, and elsewhere in the digest we just say for. So assigned to neighborhood policing and patrol. So I think the question was if there was a reason that we use assigned to here.
Above we used for. Where does it say there? How does that read? I did see.
Peter has it highlighted.
Yeah, I see it. Uh-huh.
Can we change this to for police, neighborhood policing and patrol?
Well, we need to make it consistent. I mean, if we either change the top to assigned or the bottom to for. So whichever, I don't care. Michelle, which makes the most sense to you? The other suggestion was that require in the very beginning that we say that requires, which is why I don't like the bullets, that requires the San Francisco Police Department to maintain, comma, and then say 1,971 fully sworn officers and a maximum number of fully done. So I don't know. That was a suggestion as well.
I think it looks good the way it is.
Yeah. I agree.
Okay. So you just leave it the way it is, correct? I'm for it.
Regularly, yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, then I think we've probably looked at all of the concepts of our public discussion. Has anybody found anything that we've missed? If not, one more.
Regularly value. Okay.
All right, if that's the case, then I think we might be ready for a final reading.
All right. The way it is now, in 1994, San Francisco voters approved a change to the city charter parens, that requires the San Francisco Police Department parens, bullet, to have at least 1,971 full-duty sworn police officers and, bullet, to maintain a minimum number of full-duty sworn police officers for neighborhood policing and patrol. Among its duties, the San Francisco Police Commission parens, oversees the budget and staffing of the police department. The proposal. Proposition blank is a charter amendment that would remove the requirements that the police department maintain a minimum number of full-duty sworn police officers and a minimum number of full-duty sworn police officers for neighborhood policing and patrol, and replace it with regular evaluations of police staffing levels. Under Proposition blank, the chief of police would provide a report to the police commission that evaluates the current number of full-duty sworn police officers and the number of officers recommended in the future. The police commission would hold a public hearing on the report. A yes vote means if you vote yes, you want to remove the city charter requirements that the San Francisco Police Department maintain a minimum of 1,971 full-duty sworn police officers and a minimum number of full-duty sworn police officers for neighborhood policing and patrol. A no vote means if you vote no, you do not want to make these changes.
Okay.
Any comments from the committee? If not, the chair entertains a motion to adopt.
I move to adopt the draft as authored. That's fine.
And I second the motion to adopt as drafted.
All in favor, Scott Patterson,
Approve, aye.
Michelle Anderson,
Aye, yay, whatever.
Lauren Gerardin,
Aye.
and Betty Packard, aye. We have a unanimous vote. Thank you very much. The measure is adopted for today as there is an approval process, not approval process, an appeal process. If you would like for us to reconsider this measure, we ask that you put into writing what part of this measure you would like for us to reconsider. Give us a reconsideration in writing of your own, what you would replace it with, and then we will reconsider this on Thursday morning during the appeals process. If you would submit your proposed language to publications at sfgov.org by 4 p.m. tomorrow, July 29th, 2020, we will take that up on Thursday. So that I don't really want to go into any discussions at the moment because we're going to do a word you need to know discussion thoroughly further on. But at this point, we do need to list the any words to place on our list for the words you need to know.
From the police initiative,
Yes.
I think that you need a full duty sworn officer.
Okay.
I think that you need to also define neighborhood policing and patrol.
Okay.
Other than that, I didn't find any difficult. And maybe we don't need neighborhood policing and patrol. Those are the two that I had from that.
This
Those
is up
are
to
the-
this.
Those are the two that I had from the policing. Full duty sworn police officers and neighborhood policing and patrol.
Okay, then this is not a time when we're discussing it. This is a time when we're listing them. So,
I'm just, yeah. Yeah, I was just letting you know those were the two that I had.
okay. Yeah, I only saw the one, which is full duty sworn police officers. I thought neighborhood policing and patrol was understood, but on the list, we can discuss it.
Yeah, I think it should be talked about, but
Yeah,
it's only one thing, full duty sworn police officer.
okay, that's on our list. And we had the proposal this morning. I didn't particularly, nothing jumped out at me this morning. It was yours. Michelle, did you have any words that you thought needed to be listed on the words you need to know? I did not see any, which is why executive pay is about the only thing. Gross receipts is always on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Receipts,
I personally thought top executive pay is explanatory, but maybe we need to put that on the list and we can discuss it later.
Betty, I had 4.
Okay.
Compensation, since as we discussed, it's not just pay, there's a whole lot actually rolled up into that. Gross receipts, I know the word gross really confuses a lot of people versus net. And I always have to double check. Payroll expense, that I think that's a little in there. And highest paid managerial employee, I think, is defined, so we could use a definition of that. We kind of we tossed the mouthful out there without it.
Well, let's put them on the list, and then when we go over the list,
those were my 4.
Yeah, and we're going to go over the list, and I'm not sure which day we're really going to have the time for it. We're looking at that probably on Tuesday, but either Monday or Tuesday, and so that we can start, or maybe even postpone it till Thursday, depending upon the time involved with the 2 major proposals that we're going to have next week. So, but it will give us time to look at it, and I want us to go over it before the final, so that we can have a final look at the definitions as well. So sometimes we leave it right to the end and then we don't have a final definition. And I'd like to be able to look at all that. So I think we need to probably bring it up twice for a look and then a final catch. So I'm leaving, we're putting those on the list and we'll look at those next week. Now is when I am required to open the floor to public comment on any matters not appearing on the agenda that are within the jurisdiction of the BSC. I see David's already on the list. David?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. By the way, I did not have public comment on the words you need to know, but I would suggest that you probably should have an opportunity for public comment on that, even if you're not taking action, since it's a listed agenda item. On general public comment, based on the issue this morning, seems like days ago, but it was just this morning, on the executive compensation measure, I think it's incredibly important in the future, not this cycle anymore, but in the future, that you not consider digests and process for ballot measures until they have been formally submitted to the department and signed, sealed, and delivered and qualified, so that you're absolutely looking at the latest and greatest text if it's an initiative submitted, or the final version from the Board of Supervisors, final with sign off, with tails, with whatever the Ledge Digest was for the final version. I'm incredibly nervous about these second drafts and third drafts that weren't the final version that passed and left the board. There is a specific process for the board to certify that it is the final copy and to transmit that with a cover sheet that gets date stamped at the department. Excuse me, that was department in parens. I should be specific. The elections department, sorry. And I think that's the version that you should be looking at. I think I mean, we did, what was done today was done, but I think it should be avoided in the future to have an earlier version, and whatever you can do to change your practices so that doesn't happen again would be great. I'm not blaming, I'm not casting aspersions. I think that should not happen in the future.
Well,
I hope I've made it clear.
Yes, you have.
Okay, thanks.
Caitlin, you're on. You're next, I think. Caitlin?
Hi, everyone. My apologies. I had my hand up from earlier.
Okay. All right, then Jen. Jen? Hello, Jen? She has her hand up. Peter, is she? Are you on 3?
Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, great. Hi, yeah, this is Sensei. I want to also, I want to make a note about the updates to the Ballot Simplification Committee website today with updating, putting the new legal text for the business tax on top executives. I think the link to other relevant legislative materials also need to be updated because it's still, because I think on the legal text, it says that it belongs to file 200629, whereas I guess what the deputy city attorney mentioned that like the old one was from like a different file. That's incorrect. So, and I think the link to other relevant legislative materials is linked to the incorrect file. But I would suggest that that link be changed to, I guess, file number 200629.
All right.
That's all.
Thank you for the suggestion. Anything else?
That's all. Thank you.
All right. Okay. If there is no other public comment, the public comment is closed and we are adjourned until 9:30 on Thursday morning, July 30th. I thank the committee for a long day.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye. See you
Bye.
Wednesday.